Good evening, everybody. I just don't want to get too close to this microphone because they're new ones and they're quite powerful. Welcome, everybody, to our council meeting. I'll just acknowledge that we acknowledge the Whadjuk people as the traditional owners of the Greater Fremantle Walyalup area, and we recognise that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important today. This meeting is being recorded and streamed live online, and while all care is taken to maintain privacy, visitors in the public gallery and members of the public submitting a question may be captured in the recording. So I'll just go through a couple of things and then we'll come to public question time. Attendance, apologies and leaves of absence. We have a leave of absence from the Mayor, Hannah Fitzharding, and the CEO, Glenn Dougal. And we have an absence from Councillor Frank Mofflin. There are no others, no. Applications for leave of absence? There are none? No. Disclosures of interest by members? Councillor Sullivan.
Yes, I have an interest to disclose in C item 24095. The South Fremantle Heritage Area Review. The interest is because my property is proposed to be included on the list in the complementary section, whatever it's called. And I'll declare that there's a bit of confusion as to whether it's financial or proximity. So we've ticked both boxes. And I will leave when that item comes up.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Van Dawson?
Yes, I also have an interest to declare, and that's in relation to item C24096, which is the significant tree register item. I have a proximity interest to one of the properties in that item, which is 21 Harvest Road. I'm the owner of 19 Harvest Road, so I will leave the room when that item is discussed.
Thank you. There are no others? No. Responses to previous public questions? Sorry, Councillor Graham.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, look, my property's on that heritage list as well, but it's contributory level 3, I think, which is the bottom of the ladder. So I didn't think I needed to declare an interest. So I haven't asked anyone about that. So I'll take advice from the governance officer whether I need to leave the room or not. I don't know. The room for it, to be honest.
Through the
it's a
chair.
nothing thing.
Through the chair, Councillor Jeff Graham, it would be the same as Councillor Andrew Sullivan, in which case I would recommend that you disclose that interest as well.
Oh, well, I'll take that advice. I'll declare an interest in whatever item it is to do with the that item, given that my house has been included on it by the looks of it, and I'll mostly leave the room.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Graham.
Sorry, Councillor Deputy Mayor Archibald. The property that I live in is on the list for that item, but it has not changed under the review. So that may pose another governance question. Sorry, I'll repeat. The property that I live in is on the register, but there's been no change as part of the review.
So just through the chair, council can determine as to whether these councillors do participate in this item. If you do wish to do so, we can just put a motion forward right now to allow you to participate in this item and stay in the meeting. So that's up to you.
Could I just ask, Councillor Graham, your interest, you've already got your house listed, haven't you? So that hasn't changed either.
Well, I don't know, to be honest with you. I haven't really followed it. I don't know whether it's put on, but it's in the list and it says it's contributory level 3. That's all I know. I only looked at it for interest, nothing of serious interest.
Councillors, I think we should move a motion that we accept that the interest is a collective one and perhaps put a vote to the council that we allow the members to remain in the chamber. If we don't move that motion, we will not have a quorum and the item will be deferred.
So I'd be happy to move that Councillors Graham and Williamson Wong interest is an interest in common, but I don't wish to have mine because it's a change in. Yep. So I'd move that the interest declared by Councillors Williamson, Wong and Graham be considered an interest in common and that they be permitted to remain and vote on the item.
I'm happy to second that. All those in favour? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. We now move on to responses to previous public questions taken on notice. There are numerous responses to questions that were taken on notice at the previous meeting, so we'll take that as accepted at this stage. We'll move to item 6, which is public question time. Now, in doing this, we have a number of people who wish to speak on planning items. Although you are listed at this point, you can speak in this section of the agenda, or you can wait until we deal with that particular item if you prefer to speak just before the item. So I'll perhaps just call the names out, and if you prefer to wait, then just let me know and we will bring your name up when we deal with the item. So the first is on item 1 and 3, Michael Clare. Yeah, and each person has 3 minutes. If you could come to the podium, because we do record what you say. Thank you. And yeah, 3 minutes. I think that gets tracked by, and so you'll be reminded when the 3 minutes are
Is this just for the first item, or am I doing both at the same time? Because I'm presenting on 2 items.
You can do both, I guess that means we've got 6 minutes. Yeah.
Both.
Okay, if you'd
Okay.
like to. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And if you wish to take a shorter period of time, that would be excellent.
Thanks. Good evening and thank you for your time. My name is Michael Clare from Developed. I am the applicant seeking support for the proposal at 19 Essex Street in Fremantle. I'm joined in person by Matthew Rawlingson from Bellenbach and by Mark Spadaccini from Rothy Loymans. We represent the landowners and proponents of the development. We are pleased that the application received the supportive recommendation of approval from the City's Planning Department. We have worked closely with the City's Planning Department, ensuring pre-lodgement meetings were undertaken and consistent feedback has been sought throughout to ensure our development meets their expectations. We are now seeking support from Council to endorse the City's recommendation for a 4-storey tourist development at number 19 Essex Street. The proposed development includes internal alterations to the existing building, as well as the addition of a 4-storey building to the rear of the site. The proposed land use is for short stay accommodation, comprising 80 rooms with 247 beds and associated amenities. In addition to the short stay accommodation, a small bar is proposed. The short stay accommodation will offer a mid-tier price accommodation option that is suitable for all types of people hoping to visit and enjoy the city of Fremantle. The development site is located on Essex Street in the heart of the central business district within the city of Fremantle. Essex Street is a thriving city centre commercial infill area with rich heritage and cultural fabric. The site is a 1,614 square metre lot, 1,614 square metre lot, benefiting from vehicular access from Norfolk Lane to the rear of the site. The development is largely consistent with the planning framework. It meets the maximum height requirements and the objectives of the zone. The proposed building envelope is suitable for this site's location, and the additions have been well set back from Essex Street to reduce any visual bulk impacts to the streetscape. Whilst we acknowledge that there is a parking shortfall on site, we are confident that this departure from the minimum requirement is reasonable, given guests are not anticipated to drive to site, and the site benefits from high frequency public transport options located in close proximity. This is reflected in the city's planning assessment of the report. In addition to the alternative transport options, the development proposes considerable bicycle parking which were increased in light of the neighbours' concerns about reduced bicycle parking on site. The development has been designed to facilitate adequate, safe and convenient parking and access, maintaining the existing arrangement off Norfolk Lane, with a review undertaken of the plans by our transport engineers, which confirmed that the development is compliant with the relevant Australian standards and the city's requirements. The proposed additions to the existing building have been thoughtfully designed with consideration for the site's context, the heritage principles, resident amenity and neighbouring properties. The
And
design
your
has been
3 minutes.
supported by the city's Development Advisory Committee. Okay. Can I just sum it up? In summary, the proposed development is suitable in this city centre location and provide considerable economic stimulus to surrounding businesses in the city of Fremantle. The design is supported by the city's DAC and the proposal ticks the relevant planning boxes. We ask the council to support the development to ensure continued high quality growth in the city centre. Now to Atfield Street. Again, we are pleased that the application received a supportive report and recommendation for approval by the city's planning department. We worked really closely with the city throughout the process, attending several meetings and listening to what they had in mind in terms of reducing the impact on the neighbours, and as a result, we have amended the plans. I'm now seeking council support to endorse the city's recommendation for approval. The proposed additions to the existing building have been thoughtfully designed with consideration for the site's context, its heritage principles, and the neighbouring properties. The owners are really passionate about restoring this home and making it their forever family home. Whilst it has taken 12 months to get to this point, the development is now largely compliant with the applicable planning framework, with minimal variations sought to the R codes. Importantly, each of these minor variations clearly meet the relevant design principles, as was highlighted in the city's planning officer's report. Specifically, the following matters do not meet the deemed to comply requirements of the R codes: 2 lot boundary setbacks, the boundary wall length, and visual privacy. Regarding these proposed variations, the following is noted. There are only 2 minor variations proposed to the lot boundary setbacks that are not likely to result in any amenity impacts to neighbours. The design has prioritised softening its display to neighbours and reducing its visual bulk. Given the development complies with building height and site coverage, visual bulk, again, is not anticipated to be a genuine concern. The boundary walls proposed ensure a more effective use of private open space for the residents of the proposed site, and the boundary wall is limited to single story, given we already agreed to increase the first floor setback to remove this portion of boundary wall. Boundary walls are also very prominent in the area, being tight sites. The boundary wall that is constructed on the eastern boundary means that it ensures the neighbouring properties will receive adequate winter sun. In addition to the above, the owners have agreed that a condition requiring screening for all habitable room windows that overlook private open space on adjoining properties can be applied. As such, this matter should therefore be considered compliant. In addition to the above, overshadowing has been raised as a concern for the neighbours. As previously mentioned, we meet the deemed to comply requirements of overshadowing. The proposed shadow cast is 33%, and given the lot is zoned R30, the maximum allowable shadow cast is 35%. This should realistically be where this discussion ends, as the decision maker is obliged to grant approval for an element of an application that meets the deemed to comply requirements of the R codes.
That is your 3 minutes.
Okay. Yep. Any questions on either item?
Do any councillors have any questions? No? Thank you. Thanks very much. The next person on the list is Philippa Porteous, speaking on item 1. You'd prefer to wait? Yep, thank you. Megan Tremaine.
Hi, my name is Megan Tremaine, and I'm reading a statement on behalf of Karen Tremaine, who's the owner of Unit 8 in the Old Flour Mill, to oppose the proposed development of 19 Essex Street. The DA for 19 Essex Street is an unprecedentedly high-density development for Fremantle, which will greatly impact on the 38 adjoining or proximate residences. Consideration of the impacts on neighbouring residents is integral to good planning and development. The DA for 19 Essex Street fails in this regard, as existing residents abutting the DA site have not been considered, noting no mention of the Old Flour Mill in their heritage impact statement. This failure has resulted in design flaws that will impose on neighbouring properties due to the issues associated with noise, visual impact, overshadowing, the sheer height, bulk and density of the development, as well as the risk of structural impact to adjacent heritage buildings. Major concerns about noise from a 24/7 tourist operation have not been covered by the acoustic report, with no specification for how noise issues will be managed or evidence of effort to reduce the impact on neighbours. The bar, kitchen and communal dining all abut residential properties along the service corridor. Ideally, the service corridor would border Norfolk Lane to reduce impact on neighbours and provide ease of access for rubbish collection. Parking shortfalls, traffic congestion and circulation are also issues, with no provision of parking and no pick-up or drop-off area provided for the 250 guests as well as staff. This adds to an already congested area due to tourist destinations in close proximity. The rear portion of the DA is 4 stories, abutting residential properties on Essex Street and Norfolk Street. There are currently only 2-storey buildings in the surrounding area, with the proposed bulk scale and design of this DA out of character for the neighbourhood. Overlooking from the 24 bedrooms and overshadowing from the structure will impact neighbouring properties, including blocking morning sunshine into Karen's courtyard in Unit 8. So this just shows what it looks like from the courtyard, and their 4-storey structure will be blocking sunlight into that outdoor area. That's the only private outdoor area for her unit. The height of the development should be reduced to 3 stories to minimise impact to neighbouring properties. Window setback should also be increased to comply with the residential design codes, 4.5 metres from boundaries to preserve privacy for neighbours. The waste management report is flawed due to the unacceptable location of bins adjacent to existing homes and impracticality of bin collection from Norfolk Lane. The waste management proposal is also inconsistent with previous development requirements, with the neighbouring technical college required to provide on-site bin collection. Based on these serious matters which remain unaddressed, this DA should not be approved. The council needs to adequately consider the heritage values of the neighbourhood and balance residential and commercial uses. Thank you.
Thank you. That's spot on. The next on the list is Frank van der Ven.
My name's Frank Vanderven. I live at 26 and 28 Norfolk Street. My wife will be speaking relating to our concerns regarding the proposed development. So while she hasn't spoken, I anticipated she was going to speak before me, but needless to say, I reiterate everything she's going to say. We have engaged we spoke to the National Trust, and we only received today a recommendation from themselves, which I don't propose to read out verbatim, but I have taken excerpts from it, which I'll wish to share, and obviously a copy of the full report being made available to all councillors. Some glasses. The National Trust classified 26 and 28 Norfolk Street in 1974. The assessment document references the setting, stating the building is of importance as a part of the townscape of Fremantle. Adjacent buildings to 26 and 28 Norfolk Street, such as 20 Norfolk Street and 18 Norfolk Street, contribute to the diverse streetscape. However, these structures sit well with the landscape at 2 stories high. A 4-story structure will have significant impact on the streetscape setting, shadowing the single-story building at 2628 Norfolk Street. Flour Mill, Heritage Place 871, a state-registered place in proximity to the proposed development, will also be impacted by the 4-story design. As highlighted on pages 16 through 17 of the architectural report, Structures within the vicinity of the development site on Essex Street sit at 1 to 2 stories, including the Port Flower Mill. Impact to this heritage registered place was not discussed in the heritage impact statement and should be given consideration. A 4-story structure will disrupt the visual landscape of this precinct, despite being situated at the rear of the lot. The National Trust recommends that the City of Fremantle Council do not consent to an additional story as per section 1.1 of Schedule 7 in the Local Planning Scheme number 4, given the significant visual impact the proposed works will have on the adjoining streets and the state registered heritage places. We recommend the design be reconsidered and that the rear structure be given approval to be constructed at a maximum height of 2 to 3 stories. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. We now have Jackie van der Ven.
Good evening. My name is Jackie and my husband Frank and I live at 26 to 28 Norfolk Street in a cottage built in 1862 and it's more commonly known as Joseph's Grocery Store. Our home is State Heritage registered and directly adjoins the proposed development at 19 Essex Street. We have serious concerns about the impact this project will have both on our property and Fremantle's unique character. One concern is the waste management plan. This development proposes 5 industrial-sized bins to be taken to the verge for collection by a private contractor 3 times a week. It's important to note that there is no verge on Norfolk Lane. This has already caused issues as bins from the property are often left on the sidewalk for days. I spoke to Jerry Anderson from the Council's Waste Management Centre. He strongly recommends that the bins be collected on site. He advised that the Fremantle Technical College development faced a similar situation where waste was originally proposed for roadside collection. Due to safety concerns, it was made a condition of that development that waste be collected on site. We believe the same condition should apply here as a new build. There is no reason this can't be accommodated. A new build should be an opportunity to improve a situation, not ignore it and not worsen it. In terms of design, the development would drastically reduce the natural light in our home. Our entire rear garden, a place that we enjoy with our family and our friends, would be cast into shadow, and an additional 15% of our house also affected. Our neighbours at 24 Norfolk Street, who are currently overseas and unable to represent themselves, face even greater shadowing with the 20% of their property and also their entire garden. Moreover, our private spaces will be overlooked by 24 openable windows from the proposed backpackers accommodation, compromising our privacy, exposing us to noise, especially in the evenings when we most enjoy our veranda and our backyard in privacy. From our veranda, our view of the sky will be completely blocked by this towering structure. The sheer bulk of the building is so concerning. The Heritage Council recommends that new buildings be subservient to the existing historical context, and this building instead dominates it. Viewed from Norfolk Street, it will overpower the streetscape, dwarfing the single-storey homes. The developer's architectural report completely ignored this aspect of the development. This threatens to erode the heritage charm that Norfolk Street is known for. Consideration should be given to softening the colour palette of the building, as it should be drawing on the traditional buildings that surround it. The current proposal for a dark brown metal facade is a very stark contrast. The only materials used in the surrounding buildings are limestone and cream or grey rendered buildings. It disrupts the visual harmony of the area and it clashes with the traditional aesthetics of our neighbourhood. Fremantle's planning framework emphasises the need to protect our historical heritage, and I strongly believe this development in its current form detracts from that goal. Our home was built in 1862. It's part of Fremantle's living history. It's listed on the state register and it adds charm to the area. If this building proceeds at 4 stories, it will be the first time in 160 years that the flour mill and Joseph's Grocery Store will no longer be visible to each other, a historic visual link that will be lost forever. I urge the Council to consider not only the immediate impacts but the long-term effects of this development on Fremantle's historic and cultural landscape. Thank you for your time.
Great, thank you. We now move on to Simon Burnell to speak on item 2.
Thanks. So, thanks for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. I'm joined by Lachlan McCaffrey from Stockland. My name's Simon Bennell from CLE Town Planning, and we're here speaking in favour of the Officer recommendation to the Development and Assessment Panel to approve the development application for 72 multiple dwellings. And we thank the City's officers for their positive report and assessment process. So the application proposes 72 dwellings within Stockland's Beaconsfield medium density precinct, which consists of 48 three-bedroom terrace homes and 24 single-bedroom apartments located above the garages at the rear. The homes will be constructed in groups of 3 strata units and will deliver on housing diversity commitments made through the subdivision application and local development plan process for this precinct, which the City has recently been involved with. The homes are designed and located to activate streets, provide an alternative, highly attractive housing model, and facilitate community diversity, particularly for first home buyers, downsizers, or for singles. We thank you again for your input, and Stockland look forward to delivering this product in the first stages of development, which will be commencing in November. We're happy to take any questions if there is any.
Do any councillors have questions? No, thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you.
Just go to the other people who want to speak on item 1, just to have a little bit more order. Benedict McCarthy, are you happy to speak now? Mark Spandicini. Sorry? Okay, later. Is it Katrina Gregg? Katrina Gregg? Would you like to speak now? Isabella Bellotti? Later. Okay. Right, well, I'll just go back to the other list. That's later. We'll have to ask the speakers to put the microphone down further. Are you talking about my microphone or the speaker? Everyone's, right, okay. Esther Dyer to speak on item 3. To wait. Alex Wood on item 3. Wait. Priscilla Shawn on item 3. Georgina Willis to speak on item 4. You can speak now if you wish to. Yep. And if you could just bring the microphone closer to you. Thanks.
We did have a short little presentation slideshow that we sent earlier. Or we've got 2 printouts which we can hand around.
We can't put it up on the screen, but you can pass the information around. Thanks.
Oh, well, I need one of those then. Oh, that's a shame. Okay. So I'm Georgina from Bernard Seaver Architects, and this is Chris from Urbis. Just talking about the development for 5 Norfolk Street, Fremantle. The development intends to cater for all household types of the local community, including families, couples ageing in place, extended families and multi-generational families. The design provides high quality and high amenity apartments with access to northern natural daylight, cross ventilation, outlooks to Norfolk Street, private balcony and courtyard spaces, with the intention to support and encourage activity and neighbourhood life. The following development application submission, the project went to a 3rd design advisory review. Following the meeting and responding to the DAC comments, minor amendments have been made to the proposed development, in which we just wanted to highlight here. Primary amendments were the deep soil area 2 was included now in the ground floor plan. Addition of 3 numbered trees and understory planting, and relocation of the stores. We also just wanted to highlight some primary amendments as well. Reduction to the plan to area up on the second floor level, as deep soil area 2 is now provided for at ground level. Car park 2 is set back from the northern boundary to accommodate planting at the ground level. Canopy cover to the ground floor car park is set back also from the northern boundary. Primary items in addressing adjoining properties amenity, which has been a point of discussion across the project. Building bulk is set back from the 3 boundaries, primarily to the eastern boundary to maintain their amenity. Parking has been removed from the eastern side of car park 2. Parking and circulation is screened by soft planting and masonry screen walls to eastern and northern neighbours to mitigate noise and vehicle lights. Terrace planting to the eastern neighbour to soften edge conditions. So I think essentially that just sort of summarises a couple of key points.
Thank you.
No worries.
Did you wish to speak as well?
No, I'm okay.
Okay. But are there any questions from councillors? No. Thank you very much.
No worries.
We now move on to item 5. Pamela Catalini. Oh, later? Okay. Do all the Catalini, Anthony Catalini, Stacey Catalini, do you wish to speak later? Yep. Gerard O'Brien.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and thanks, councillors.
I'm just a councillor and deputy.
Acting Madam Mayor. I just want to talk about these trees, and I am a little bit concerned of where this is all growing legs a bit, which these trees are very old trees and they're very dangerous in the sense that we have simply only removed the limbs after they've died and before they fall on a child. We've got people playing there. Originally, these trees were put on the register illegally. They were put on the register when it was owned by public land. It was owned by the government, and the Act says that you can't actually put any tree on a significant tree register when it's owned by the public land or by the government. So it was done well before we bought the land, and we were the first owner since the government. The trees are full of borers, so there is an issue. But probably the biggest thing that I'm concerned about is that not only now used as growing legs everywhere, the recommendation from the council officer is that we have to have a succession plan. So not only these trees are significant, the baby trees that we're going to plant are significant. And I wonder, in a democratic society, when does this stop? You know, we own this land, we pay for the land, and I don't mind looking after the trees, but this is just extending far too far when council dictate how we're going to plant our gardens and by whom and by when and what trees and all the rest of it. So it really does worry me where this is all heading to. I acknowledge that there is some significant trees. I don't think these are any of them. If you look at the trees, they're pretty ordinary. So I just hope this doesn't grow legs and everyone uses. We still live in a democracy, so I truly hope everyone thinks about it open-mindedly. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerard. And we have Rob, is it Tourette? Speak later. Okay. So now we'll go back to Philippa Porteous. Hang on, no, we won't. These are all being dealt with when we get down here. Sorry. So we'll now move on to item 7. There are no petitions that I understand. No. There are no deputations. There are no presentations. Confirmation of the minutes. So I will move the minutes of the ordinary meeting of council dated 28th of August 2024. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Williamson Wong. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. We move to item 11, elected member communication, and Councillor Thompson wishes to speak in this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As council will be aware, ex-councillor Robert Fiddick passed away a few days ago. So I'd just like to say a few words in respect of him. And I will say, as Rob would have said, it's Fittock, not Fittick, as he reminded council many times. He had a great sense of humour and was a great community contributor as well. He spent hours both as a councillor and as a community member working on issues that benefited our community. Specifically, the North Rio Bowling Club and our community owes him a debt of gratitude as he kept the club going for years through sheer hard work and persistence. He was always fixing things, upgrading the kitchen, building the barbecue area, helping install lights and the CCTV, serving at the bar and carrying out day-to-day maintenance. He also initiated events like the Dogs Long Table Brekkie. He was a great dog man. Even in the last year, it was Rob who arranged the donation, collection and storage of equipment and furniture from the Claremont Bowling Club to the North Rio Bowling Club to make sure that that could get going. Again, Rob also contributed to and worked tirelessly with the local branch of the RSL and was a major advocate and worker for Legacy for many years. Through his role in the RSL, he helped make the North Rio Anzac Day celebrations into the significant commemoration that it has become. And under the sometimes gruff exterior, he was a very compassionate man, a regular volunteer at St. Pat's and a Christmas helper in the kitchen. He has made a huge contribution to our community, and we do, of course, forgive him for being an Eagles supporter. Before becoming a councillor, Rob was never shy of giving me advice on council policies and decisions. And with the North Ward vacancy coming up, I suggested one day at the bowling club that rather than giving me advice, perhaps he should stand for council. Never a man for prevarication nor half measures, he immediately said yes. When he stood for council, he was so well known that he was twice elected unopposed. And Rob took to planning like a duck to water, thankfully for me, eventually becoming chair of planning, and he was a bloody good chair. He was attentive, engaged councillor who listened carefully but always had his own point of view and was not afraid to express it. As a councillor, Rob put his heart and soul into doing what he considered to be right and best for the community, and I've got to say, I will miss him.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thompson. Does anybody else have any? No. The last time I saw Rob was Anzac Day, and he was there, as usual, supporting all the people who went along. I didn't know him very well, and I didn't cross over with him on council, but he was a great community person, so thank you for those words. Okay, we now move on to item 12, which is the reports from officers. So the first planning item we're dealing with is item 1, Essex Street, lot number 19, lot 8. So I'll just go back to the people who wish to speak on item 1. Philippa Porteous.
Hello, councillors. My name's Philippa, and I am the proud owner of Port Mill Bed and Breakfast at 317 Essex Street. However, I know firsthand of what a backpackers brings to a community, as I also own 2 backpackers, one 100-bed and one a 70-bed. The proposal said that not many backpackers have cars, when the Australian Backpackers Association has statistics saying 50 to 60% of backpackers have cars, and I definitely agree with that with the backpackers we have at the moment. The proposal of just 2 parking bays, or 3, just seems completely inadequate and inappropriate. Already our guests have a difficult time finding parking, and the proposal is to remove 3 parking bays, which does seem wrong as we actually need more parking. The noise created by 240 people would have a negative effect on neighbours. with the many residents living just a few metres from this proposed development. Smoking, drinking, altercations, and antisocial behaviour are often common occurrences of guests of backpackers, which all have a negative impact on the local neighbourhood. Rubbish: the average backpacker cooks, often 3 meals a day. The amount of waste is huge, and therefore 240 people would be the equivalent of 60 homes of 2 parents and 2 children, creating that much waste. So the recommendation from the proposal of just 3 waste collections a week would seem inadequate. I just ask the council not to support this application and to think of the many residents who live in the vicinity and whose lives will be greatly affected if this proposal occurred, and it will change their lives forever. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to Benedict McCarthy.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Benedict McCarthy. I'm the Director of Planning Horizons. We were the initial applicant and designer and town planning consultancy that had approval for the 3-storey hotel from 2020. I'd just like to go through a couple of differences between what we had approved, where we went through a very difficult and involved process to get that approval, and the current application for Essex Street. We provided a minimum of 13 bays on site, including sufficient reversing area for delivery and waste vehicle collection vehicles. Had 8 hotel rooms only. Building was 3 stories with a very discreet top floor decking, which was at the persistence of the council at the time and also the design review panel. We maintained solar access to all the adjoining properties, and we had significant side setbacks of 5.3 metres from the common boundary with 17 Essex Street. In summary, what the current proposal has is reducing from 13 bays to 4 bays, provides no collection for waste on site, is going to have 63 bedrooms and 247 beds, which is a significant increase on 8 bedrooms. And the building is now 4 stories high with significant building bulk created across the board. Solar access to adjoining properties is also significantly impacted, as are the side setbacks to 17 Essex Street, where the setback has been reduced to just 3 metres. As you can see, over 4 years, there's been quite a significant change in what are the deemed to be the acceptable criteria by the in light of this development. We would encourage our proposal that was approved in 2020 be maintained as the benchmark, as this proposal is largely based on that approval, as we believe has gone far too beyond what is actually acceptable for the area in terms of bulk, overshadowing, overlooking, and also waste as well. Car parking has been spoken about quite a bit already, but as you can see, the provision of 4 bays on site is clearly not going to be sufficient for 247 odd people coming and going. Warranted that, yes, if they are only visiting Fremantle, they'll probably not need a vehicle, but tendency is for these guests to want to go further abroad than just Fremantle, up north, down south, and therefore they will have their private vehicles. So in the time that they actually travelling through Fremantle and beyond, where are they going to park these vehicles? It'll ultimately be on the street, and therefore those who wish to come for a meal or for a beer or something like that into Fremantle, all of a sudden the car bays that used to be there will no longer be there because they've been utilised by this development. Service vehicles and deliveries, again, when you have a small bar and a hotel or backpackers that's going to have 247 people rotating through 24 hours a day, there's going to be a number of staff on site that are going to be required. I don't see anywhere in the traffic report or in the architect report that this has been accounted for. Where do these staff park? Surely as a 24-hour facility, they're not going to be able to catch public transport all of the time. So again, that needs to be taken into account, which I don't believe it has. And lastly, waste management plan. I support what has been previously spoken about. There's having putting bins on the verge when there is no verge is simply not acceptable. It's going to be infestation for rats, rodents. What is actually quite a nice street, Norfolk Street, is going to end up being quite atrocious. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now move to Mark Spandicini. Could I ask if councillors have any questions? No? Thank you. We now move to Katrina Gregg.
Good evening, councillors and fellow residents and people. I'm speaking on behalf of the Council of Owners for 15 to 17 Essex Street, as opposed to the individual owners who have, in many cases, spoken already and who have already submitted very comprehensive reports on their view of the proposal. I would suggest if councillors haven't, they should really have a look at those reports. They're very thoroughly written. In particular, the Council of Owners is very concerned that of 15 to 17 Essex Street, that despite the proponents' claim that they have done a thorough heritage review and considered the local environment and the cultural richness of Fremantle, two of the most significant buildings in the area, which is 26 and 28 Norfolk Street and 15 to 17 Essex Street, were not even mentioned in the original report. So, sorry, 15 to 17 wasn't mentioned. It's at 1A level of state heritage significance. It is really important. It, like Norfolk Street, is basically on blocks of limestone in the ground. Any significant work next to it will undoubtedly cause risk to it. I know there have been proposals that it would now be required for a dilapidation report to have been undertaken, as it was previously when Norfolk Street was being developed, which is important. But the key things that we'd like to make comment about are that essentially the proposal was predicated on the fact that 15 to 17 Essex Street was characterised in the architectural reports, in the heritage reports, in the development proposal generally, as being a two-storey hospitality and short-stay accommodation venue. There are 12 residences next door. There is one short-stay accommodation, which is the B&B. The site actually has strata rules that prevent short-stay accommodation there because of the issue of coming and going and inconvenience to residents. It appears to the owners of 15 to 17 that the notion of residents being integral to the city fabric has been ignored. So whilst we're talking about cultural richness and diversity in Fremantle, what this proposal appears to do is in fact to repel residents. So the rate-paying invested people are being potentially put out by transient, not probably very caring travellers. So we are concerned about the boundaries. We are concerned, as other people have mentioned, about the waste disposal, which will happen all day and all night, involving heavy bins. There'll be glass bottles thumping and crashing. It sounds like we're talking apocalyptic kind of problems, but if you're right next to that and there is no getting away from it, your quiet enjoyment of your property and your residential aspect of the city rapidly goes away. So if the city only becomes the 130 drinking venues in the neighbourhood, not the residents that give it its texture, we're in a lot of trouble. I realise that's my 3 minutes. I'd also just like to say the parking issue is a huge issue because of course, if there's nowhere safe for the staff to go, that's a problem. But in essence, what we are concerned about is the things we just said, that the effect of the proposal is likely to reduce the diversity and vibrancy of the city centre, causing residents to leave, and that the original proposal was predicated on information that just didn't include the content of the neighbourhood, the very significant content of the neighbourhood. So I urge the councillors to think about that.
It's a lot of people to speak, so we try to keep to the 3 minutes. Thank you. And Isabella Radotti, is it? I'm sorry, I can't read it properly. Are there any questions from councillors? No? Thank you. Thank you. That is all the speakers, I believe, for item 1. Is there anyone in the audience who didn't have their name called out? No, good, thank you. So we'll now move on to the item itself. Now I'm aware that Councillor Sullivan has an alternate motion. The option is for Councillor Sullivan to move the alternate motion, or another elected member could move the officer's recommendation. So Councillor Sullivan, perhaps I could just ask, would you like to?
a sense from the other elected members, but
I think
sounds
we
like
can take it.
they
Yeah.
would prefer the alternative recommendation to be moved first, so I'll do
I
that.
would think so. Councillor Sullivan has moved it, the alternate recommendation, seconded by Councillor Kamada. I'll leave you to open the debate, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. So the alternative recommendation, just to introduce it, it was published last night, is a proposal that we not support the officer's recommendation to the JDAP, and that we provide some reasons for it, and I have listed some of the reasons. It's not up on the screen yet, but hopefully it will be soon for members of the public and for the audience. In essence, the way I considered this proposal is my sense is the land use is actually perfectly reasonable. So I want to talk about what the merits of the proposal before I launch into why I don't think it should be approved in its current form. It is an appropriate land use. Notwithstanding that it's an appropriate land use, it does come with challenges, as do a lot of other land uses in the city centre. So restaurants, hotels, all sorts of bars, all sorts of activities in the city centre are very difficult to implement in a way that creates a place for all people to be able to live and work and recreate. So that's always going to be knowledge. But at the end of the day, the land use is appropriate. And what we need to do as a council is look at the built form of it, the operations of it, and the impacts of that, particularly for the adjoining owners, and in terms of the streetscape and the public realm issues. And that's what I have tried to do. My view of the scheme, the scheme specifically deals with heights in the West End area, and it talks essentially about buildings pretty well as of right, almost as of right, of being 3 stories with a 3 stories with a 4-story setback. I think some people assume that it's an automatic as of right, that 3 stories, but there's a part in the scheme that preempts all of those maximum height conditions, which is section 1.2 of Schedule 7. And that basically gives us a bunch of things, a list of things that we need to look at before we determine any height in the West End. And those include the heritage of the area, the amenity impacts on the adjoining properties, and the general impact on the existing and desired character of the area. Now, the vast majority of this proposal does satisfy that for me. But where it doesn't satisfy that for me is the impact on the properties to the south, the impact on the heritage character of those properties to the south, and by that I mean to the properties facing Norfolk Street, and the impact on the amenity, particularly of those properties in Norfolk Street which are used as residential. But it's not just residential, and we shouldn't be focused only on residential when it comes to amenity, because if something is a restaurant and it's in a heritage building and it enjoys space that might be an outdoor courtyard or whatever, and that can't be built on because it's a heritage building, then we do need to respect that and protect that. So there are a number of properties along Norfolk Street which are predominantly 1 story high, and when the developers developed next to those, they were required to be very respectful of that streetscape and the like. And I feel that in this instance, the carryover effect of that is equally important along the southern edge of this development. The other aspects, I guess, of height and the like is that it's also not just about the, the height of the top of the wall. It's also about the scale of this development. The way in which it presents is fine from the front, from Essex Street, because it is so far back. It's not too bad from Norfolk Lane, because again, it's significantly further back, but also because you don't really read it in the context of Norfolk Street because of the trees that exist in that environment. And of course, if you're standing there looking down the easement to the development, you've got a fairly large building behind you. So there is context in that area in Norfolk Lane to suggest that when you're looking at it from that perspective that it's okay. But it's when you are looking at it from the properties immediately to the south and Norfolk Street itself, because you're looking over the top of single-storey residential, that the bulk, the way in which this building is being presented as essentially a four-storey box with some level of articulation, you start to worry that it is too bulky in that context. It presents too harshly, and that it realistically needs to be broken down a little bit. Materiality needs to be looked at. The scale of each section needs to be looked at. And in my view, and that's what's written in the recommendation, it actually needs to be reduced by a level at least for a certain distance from the boundary. And that will, of course, in itself help articulate the building and give the designers opportunity to break it down a little bit rather than just seeing it as this big brown box. And I agree with the comments that were made. There is opportunity, particularly on that side, to be a little bit more respectful of the traditional materiality of that part of town and those old buildings. And I think the building in Norfolk Street has done a good job of that, and I urge the applicants to look at this. So the suggestion is that we ask the JDAP not to approve not to approve the RAR, and that the council doesn't basically support it in its current form, but in doing so, giving a clear message, an indication that in general terms, the idea, the land use, the bulk of the proposal, probably the wrong word, the majority of the proposal is acceptable, but does need to be modified. And the extended modification would be a couple of rooms each side on the top floor. So it's not necessarily an outrageous variation that we would be seeking from this proponent to make it more, or to make it respectful to the precinct in which it is going into. Now, I've focused primarily on those aspects because I personally don't feel it should be approved in its current form. I do agree, and councillors, you will have heard me going on about the issue of waste in the West End, waste collection, and indeed in a recent workshop that we had, I made it very clear that I do not support commercial waste collection bins being out in the street, and that we have to get to a system where there is much more on-site collection. And so I totally agree that we're looking at new developments, we should be imposing that. And if when it gets to JDAP, I would likely include a recommendation for a condition along those lines. I didn't think about doing it tonight, so I can't really do it at the last minute, but that's certainly something that I agree with. And I did also just want to highlight that the issue of parking is significant. I am have an office that, or until recently, had an office that was right next door to a Backpackers in the West End, and I know all the other backpack institutions quite well. And being a person that lives in South Fremantle and travels along Marine Terrace incredibly regularly, I also know where they all park, and I also get a sense for how many vehicles backpackers actually generate, and the extent to which they do clog up the parking that is actually intended for short stay visitors, the 2-hour parking even, because they don't care about the parking tickets. They just ignore them. I had one recent example where a backpacker in the building next to me had had accumulated 52 parking tickets and has paid 48 of them. Not paid 48 of them, and basically leaves this car there all day long. They also build their cars out in the street and the like. They have a lot more cars, and this backpack next to me is a lot smaller than the one that's been proposed here, and they have a significant number of vehicles that are either in the street and are there often for days on end, or they're parked all the way down to South Beach and the like. So anyone that indicates that, you know, backpackers don't have cars doesn't understand backpackers, because they do have cars. They have cars for work, they have cars because they're basically here for a short period of time, might be a month, and then they're off on their great adventure. And they spend that month fitting out their cars and the like. So I put it to you, the alternative recommendation, and see where it gets to.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Williamson-Wong.
Thank you. I'm actually going to start with a question for the manager, and apologies if I've missed something in the documents. We've heard, and I agree, there's an impact on the southern neighbours who have properties on Norfolk Street, and I guess I'm seeking some clarification around the requirements for setbacks on that property, because the application is not set back from that boundary, not significantly at all. So what are the requirements under the scheme and the planning policy for setbacks? Through the chair. Through the chair, there is no, I guess, setback requirement. It really is an amenity discussion. So when you're testing the height limits, when you're looking at the design overall and the impact on heritage, you are looking at the amenity impact of that structure against those buildings, but there isn't, for example, a 1 metre setback requirement to those neighbouring properties.
Did you wish to add any further comment, because you'll have spoken at that point?
If I don't, can I
If you
still
don't,
speak later
yeah, you
if
don't,
I've asked a
no,
question?
you only speak once in a council meeting.
But I've just asked my question.
Oh, question. Sorry. Yes, you did.
So
Okay.
I can still speak
You
later,
prefer-
can't I?
You can speak later if you wish. Yeah.
Yes,
Right.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Lorber.
Yeah, I'm just reminding folks, this is our pseudo planning meeting where we do sometimes, with indulgence of the chair, have a bit of back and forth discussion. But I also have a question, and I want to thank everyone from the community for coming in and speaking on this item. And the former hotel architect that was approved previously, that was very insightful for me, so thank you. But I actually did want to ask if and also thank Councillor Sullivan for putting this before us, because I will support this, and I appreciate your comments about addressing the waste at JDAP. But I was going to ask the question if the staff and the mover of the alternate recommendation, if we could potentially amend this to have something to deal with the waste collection and have a condition of it being, request that a condition of this being the waste collected on site. Is that something that we can do?
Through the chair, the recommendation is actually to refuse the development, so it'd probably be a reason being that waste collection is not dealt with sufficiently. As simple as that. It wouldn't be a condition, but yeah, you could add an additional point.
Councillor Lorber, did you wish to move an amendment to that effect?
Only with the mover, Andrew Sullivan, agrees to include it here.
Councillor Sullivan.
I'm happy for an additional reason to be added if the manager would like to maybe draft one, and we'll get to it later.
Okay. Thank you. We now move to Councillor Kamada.
Thank you, Councillor Archibald. Look, firstly, I'd just like to thank everyone who has come in tonight to give your insights, including Michael Clare, on this development and where it may go. While it may be appropriate land use, there certainly is a place for this type of development, but I believe this development is simply too intense. I appreciate the challenges that officers have in dealing with this, and technically it may well comply, but I do believe in its entirety, this development is just way too much for the site, and I'd much prefer to see something scaled back. For this reason, I thank Councillor Sullivan for the work he's done to put the proposed alternate motion together, and I'll certainly be supporting that.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Williamson Wong or Councillor Graham?
Thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor. Yeah, look, I was one of the few councillors that went down to a couple of the site visits here, and I'm strongly opposed to this application. I more than likely will be supporting Councillor Sullivan's amendment, because I think it does make a lot of sense from what we saw and what was presented to us. But and we had a briefing on Monday night, and the planning, we were all over it. Yes, it complies, it's this, and that's why it's been approved, and blah, blah, blah. But, I think Fremantle's a bit more sophisticated than this, isn't it? I mean, we're, potentially, or the officers are, potentially supporting something that's going to house 247 beds. These are 4 beds in a 12 square metre room. They're 4 beds in a 12 square metre room. And so work out how many rooms there are. I mean, this is almost third world stuff. I mean, if we're going to be having a development in this site next to one of the most significant heritage precincts in Fremantle, the Mill, surely we have to be a little bit better than this. Now, I understand all the planning stuff. Well, I don't understand all the planning stuff because I just can't get my head around that this was written up for approval. But anyway, and then there's the streetscape. Now, they say, well, it's from Essex Street. Well, I sit here and I can see Little Lane from here. Now, Little Lane is not a great streetscape, but it's part of the city and everyone can see it. And this is what's going to be the same in Norfolk Street, because you'll be able to see this 4-storey building from just about all points north, south, east and west. So to me, it should be a streetscape consideration. And enough's been said about the other houses on Norfolk Street, and I totally agree with all that. But there's been too many discretions used in giving this, the officers giving this the nod. So I'm not all that happy about that, to be honest, as you can tell. It sort of reminds me of the Coles development up in Hilton. That came to council with an approval, but because of the community concerns there, we did not approve that. And I think the same should be done here. The community's more important than these developers who we've never heard of. They've never approached any councillors, never heard of them, wouldn't know them. They haven't made an effort to sell their product, if you like. So I'm very cynical about them. So I cannot see any merit in this application, and it certainly doesn't pass the Freo pub test for me. So there you go.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. And could we please not have the clapping? We tend to try and keep it procedural. Thank you. Councillor Lang.
Yeah, just briefly. Broadly, I do support the idea of new backpackers in Fremantle. We can't deny that tourism is a really important part of our economy, and backpackers also provide a really strong workforce for local businesses. In terms of the local pub test, most of the people pulling those beers are probably backpackers, Jeff. So we do need to find a balance so we can support more backpackers in town. And importantly as well, those backpackers return home and speak about Fremantle, which encourages further repeat visits, and they may come back again to Fremantle, improving our tourism economy. But saying that, I can't fully support this proposal in its current form, based on the comments we've heard this evening and the arguments put forward by my colleagues. So I do hope that we can find something more suitable for this location, where we can find something for tourism and suitable for the site as well.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Sorry, I've just now got Councillor Williamson Wong.
Thank you. And I thank Councillor Sullivan for putting this forward, because I believe I will likely be supporting it. The discretion sought on land use, I agree with Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Lang in terms of that I support the tourism development on this site. I think tourism is very important to our city, and it's true that lots of our local workforce comes from backpackers, and making sure that they have suitable accommodation is also important for, yeah, I guess everything that happens, our coffees and our pints and all of those. And at the same time, I think we constantly have this struggle of wanting more development and more growth in our city, but how we balance that with the residents that we really value already having invested in living in our CBD. And Councillor Graham, you said it, our community is more important than the developers that come in, and we need the developers to come in, but we cannot forget about the community that has been here and has invested in living here. And, you know, the discretions on parking, I think we spend so much time in this chamber and outside of this chamber trying to fix the parking problem. The idea that we would simultaneously make it much worse feels a little silly to me, because backpackers do have cars. I work with plenty of backpackers at a pub who all have cars. And so I do struggle with that. And under the scheme and the planning policies, I know 3 stories is permitted. There's discretion for a 4th. The bulky and the issues with materiality that have come up tonight, I totally agree with. And I think, although we've clarified setback is not a requirement, I personally struggle with the idea that we could suddenly build all of these buildings without any setback, and that impact on the amenity of neighbours is large, and we have to figure out how to balance we have to balance new development and residents, and it's very tricky, but I'm thankful for Councillor Sullivan putting this forward, and also for the changes this evening for the waste management, because that is another issue that I'm sure we'll be dealing with. So yeah, look forward to supporting Councillor Sullivan's alt tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, could I ask, when you put it up, you put recommendation 4 up as a separate item, because I intend to vote against that one. And my reason for that is I think that it actually weakens the recommendation that Councillor Sullivan has crafted, because the first 3 recommendations are all based on either policies that we have or local planning schemes. The 4th one is just simply, is already in the officer's report, is subject, the application itself is subject to the development of a waste management plan. Until such time as a waste management plan is developed for this, then we have no means to know as to whether it will majorly impact the amenity. I mean, I can understand why residents might feel that it does, but we make our decisions based on facts and an objective analysis of the situation. We don't have a waste management plan. We haven't assessed the waste management plan. So why would we be objecting to it? So my point is that I think the first 3 recommendations are logical and based on our reference to our various, parts of our local planning scheme. But the 4th one is just, has no basis in fact. We don't know whether in fact it will be a problem or not. So I will be voting against that recommendation if you put that up separately. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Are there any other speakers on this item? I will hand it back then to Councillor.
Before I close, so I was suggesting that part 4 actually be done as an amendment to my thing, rather than just me accepting it. So I'm happy for somebody to move that as an amendment and get it seconded, and then that will give Councillor Thompson as well the opportunity to either vote for it or not vote for it.
Okay. Well, I'm a Councillor Van Dawson.
Sorry, just briefly, could I just ask a question of the officers? Is there a waste management plan? I believe there was one prepared by Talus, but it wasn't included in the agenda attachment, so we haven't had opportunity to review it. So hence Councillor Thompson's comments. But I believe, yes, that is what's proposed. And yeah, anyway, I just wanted to, could I get clarification on that?
Through the chair, there is an amended waste management plan as attachment 7, and there is one. You're correct, Councillor Van Dawson, from Tallis. The condition does say to implement that waste management plan, so that has been reviewed, and the collection from Norfolk Lane has been reviewed by our waste management team as acceptable. So it's not unreasonable if council does think that it's going to impact that laneway and the neighbouring residents, that be looked at if an approval moves.
Well, Councillor Van Dawson, would you like to move that amendment on the waste management plan?
Yes, I'm happy to move that amendment. I'd like it to be included. Trust that it will be addressed at the JDUP as well. I'm happy to assist
I'm
with that.
happy,
But
happy
yeah.
to second that. Did you wish to speak any further on the amendment?
No, thank you.
Okay, anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? No? All those in favour? Sorry?
Madam Mayor, this is like a planning committee meeting, and this is how I'd sort of approach this one. I would have thought the suggestion for a waste management one that's been proposed would be the 4th dot point in the body of Councillor Sullivan's. Is that what's being suggested?
That is what's suggested. It's part 4.
Well,
but
still
we've
just come up.
We're just putting it to the council to approve before we add it to the amendment.
Before you do it. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
So it has been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favour of the amendment? Those against? Councillor Thompson is against. It is carried. Thank you. So now we go back to the closing by Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, and I will close. I do want to emphasise, and I think Councillor Lang made the point too quite well, that this type of land use is an appropriate land use in the city centre, and it's good that they get spread around a little bit, because I wouldn't want to see them all in one location. Essex Street already has a small one, but I think it is a reasonable site for it. So I do want to emphasise that. I don't want people thinking that my motion is sort of anti-development or anti-backpacker or anti-intensification of the West End, because I support all of those things. I also want to say that whilst I appreciate all the thanks from my colleagues for me putting this up, it doesn't give me any joy at all, ever, to get in a situation where I feel the need to say something needs to get modified and we need to halt the approval until such time as they do. We need development in this city, and it does. It really it troubles me when I have to be the one who launches forward and says that this one needs to be modified. Lastly, just in terms of clarifying the waste management aspect, it absolutely, if this was approved with the officer recommendation, effectively my reading of it would have been that waste management would have been dealt with in Norfolk Street, because the way the system works is effectively a management plan is put forward. It's essentially goes through the engineering section. They look at it and give it the effective tick off, if you like. There is a process of further defining it as the process goes on, and the detail becomes apparent. And that's what the management, or that's what the recommendation is essentially doing in the officer's recommendation. So unless the decision maker specifically says, no, that's not acceptable, then that's what would have been implemented. So I think it's important that even if this is approved in even in its current form, that matter be picked up as well. So look forward to you supporting this, but also bear in mind this goes to JDAP as well.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. The alternate recommendation or the alternate motion has been moved and seconded. All those in favour? There are none against. That's unanimous. Thank you. So that item, the alternate motion for that item was approved. If people who are here for item 1 wish to leave, they're very welcome to do so. we'll move on to item 2. Okay, now we're at number 2. Right. Yeah, none of the. There's no extras for 2. Yeah, I'll just ask. Yeah. Okay, we're now going to do item 2. Are there any people in the audience who did wish to speak on item 2 who haven't already done so? No, thank you. We'll just carry on. So I will move the officer's recommendation for item 2. Sorry, I've just got to get that. Which is for the Clontarf Road development. Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Is there any discussion on this item? All those in favour? I believe that's unanimous. Thank you. So that one was carried. We'll now move to item 3. And we have Esther Dyer, who wishes to speak on item 3. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you very much for the opportunity to address you. My name's Esther Dyer. I own 19 Lily Street, which is one of the 2 properties that sits over the eastern boundary of 102 Atfield Street. I reside there with my partner, Alexander Wood, and our position is that the applicant's plans, including as revised, should not be approved. Our reasons relate primarily to the fact that the plans require the removal of a tree, which is situated around the southwestern corner of our property. In our initial comments that we sent to council, we noted that first, the tree appears to be located predominantly on our land, and secondly, it's the only established tree in our small garden, and we rely heavily on it for shade and cooling of our outdoor area. In response to that comment, the applicants in their revised plans have provided a feature survey from 2021. There's a misalignment between the boundary that's shown on the feature survey and the actual physical boundary, our fence line, which separates the 2 properties. According to the feature survey, the boundary between the properties extends into what we use as our garden and always have, and into our shed. Also, the tree that the applicants propose to remove, which we've always understood to be located in our property by reference to the physical boundary, is shown by the survey to be located wholly within 102 Atfield. And that's been expressly relied on by the officer. We do note there's an annotation on the survey which states warning ! Boundary re-establishment survey required to confirm lot boundary position and dimensions. The feature survey formed part of the applicant's revised plans and was released with the papers for the agenda item last Thursday. That's the first time we saw it. And between then and now, we haven't been able to confirm the position through our own survey. We've contacted a survey last week. Today, we've received and accepted a quote to have one done. And we've been informed that the current lead time for that work is approximately 10 days. In those circumstances, we would respectfully ask that council defer consideration of these plans, including to allow time for the survey to be carried out and these issues as to the boundary and ownership of the tree and the applicant's ability to remove it to be resolved. I do also note that if the applicant's wall were to be built along the boundary line that's shown on their survey, this would intrude into what we presently enjoy as our garden and into our existing shed. And we do understand from the applicants through a discussion yesterday, they don't intend that to occur, but that is despite what's shown currently on their plans. One specific revision to the plans we consider is likely to significantly alleviate the impact on our amenity, and we'd like to work through with the applicants, if we have that opportunity, is moving the line of their lower story northern wall that they appear to want to build up to our boundary, approximately 1 metre or more, slightly more south of what's currently proposed. And if that were done, then it would appear that there wouldn't actually be any need to remove the tree. Thanks.
Thank you. We now move to Rob Tourette. How do you say your surname? Sorry.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rob Tousset. I'm here to talk on behalf of the owners of 102. To go straight to the point about the tree shown on the survey, the issue with the survey that is showing is that the boundary wall is basically in an angle towards the inside of the boundary of the property of 102 rather than following the boundary. That's why it's the tree is inside of the property. That's why the neighbors feel like the tree is within their property, because the actual wall is in an angle to the inside of 102. So the owners of 102 have already said that, and we've shown it in the plans, we're not planning on removing that wall. We're planning on keeping that as it is, but we actually need to remove the tree to be able to continue with the proposed design. The other item I wanted to mention is the fact that we've been working with the council and the heritage officer for the past, I don't know how many months already, but it's been pretty much a year. And we've been working along with the council trying to meet every single one of the requirements. The owners have been willing to meet all the recommendations to the point where the planning officer has recommended the approval of the design. If you read through all the recommendations and all the comments from the planning officer, it's everything is positive about the project. So we ask you pretty much to support the project, which has already been supported by the planning officer. Thank you.
Thank you. We now go to Alex Wood.
Good evening, councillors. Not everything. My name is Alex Wood. I'm speaking on behalf of Nigel Moffat and Annie Fursland. So they're from 104 Atfield, which is to the south. Nigel and Annie's primary concern is the severe loss of solar access to their outdoor living area and solar panels. They commented on this via the public comments. The plans were revised purportedly to meet the deemed to comply requirements of the R codes for overshadowing. You've hopefully seen the correction markups to the overshadowing calculations. It appears from the officer's report that they relied on the fact that the overshadowing now meets the deemed to comply requirements in recommending approval of these plans. But in circumstances where the calculations contain errors, such that the deemed to comply requirements are not satisfied, it would appear necessary for the plans to be revised and the officer given a chance to reconsider prior to council considering those plans for approval. We have seen that an alternative motion has been prepared to this effect. Councillor Sullivan. While I've not had the opportunity to discuss with Nigel and Annie, I note their position is that the plans as submitted should be rejected. There is a second and related issue concerning the lot boundary setback, which remains non-compliant with the deemed to comply provisions, which warrants an amenity assessment. The planning officer comments on the setback non-compliance by noting that the outdoor living area is set back sufficiently from the common boundary so as to allow direct sunlight, direct access to northern sunlight. This is in the responsive comments to the public comments. Based on the corrected overshadowing calculations, this assessment would appear to be incorrect. I showed the patio on those plans and there's a shadow straight over the patio, especially in winter, it's quite pronounced. It therefore appears the setback assessment needs to be revisited, as the outdoor living area will be heavily impacted by the proximity of the second storey. It would appear necessary to increase the southern boundary setback in order to reduce the impact on the outdoor living area. Yeah, I do note that the applicant's overshadowing calculations have now been presented with errors on 2 occasions. Well, my markup show errors on 2 occasions. In the interest of avoiding errors in any further revised plans, I wish to raise for consideration whether the council has a means of requiring, for example, an architect to sign off on these plans before they are considered and relied on by the officer. Thank you.
Priscilla Shawn.
Good evening, everyone. I live next door to Alex and Izzy in 21 Lily Street. The planning officer admits that this development will have the greatest impact on my house. And I object strongly. I've got 2 issues, the tree and the height and bulk of this development. Now, I do have a tall wall in my backyard. It's the back wall, and built onto it was Joan Campbell's studio. It's a high wall, but I'm happy with it as it is. Now, the original design had the development coming right up to that wall and then going up even higher, twice the size. So there would have been a looming hulk in my backyard. Admittedly, 2 little windows that were opaque glass and that sort of thing. It has moved back a fraction, but it's still big and looming over the yard. And the planning officer's report appeared to think that I would have sufficient backyard that wasn't affected, that wouldn't matter. Well, I don't know who's to say that I have sufficient backyard. The other thing about it is that at no time did these people come and talk to me. They didn't come round and see what it was going to be like from my point of view. I did, after I sent a negative report in, get a scrappy slip of paper saying, if I had any problems, I could ring them. Yeah, right. They should have come to see me, and I don't believe that anybody, either from the council or from the developers, has done that. And if they had, then they must have been trespassing because they didn't seek my permission. The other thing is that the development is seen from Atfield Street's point of view, not visible, etc., etc. Well, it certainly will be visible from Lily Street. It makes me think, is Lily Street not as important as Atfield Street? It's all heritage. So, if it's going to be impact on Lily Street, then they need to think again. Now, the other thing is the tree. I don't believe the tree needs to be removed for any of the building. I think the tree is being removed because they don't like it. This is a tall, mature tree that provides shade, particularly for Alex and Izzy, and refuge for various birds and things like this. It does seem to me that if Fremantle is going to be regarded as a green and clean place, getting rid of the tree is not a good look. Okay. And what I'd like to suggest is I agree with Alex and Izzy. I want I want it sent back. I want some imagination
The 3
from
minutes.
that. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody
Priscilla.
got any questions
No.
from my emotional rant?
No questions. Thank you, Priscilla. Now, I don't think we have any other speakers on item 3. We do? Could you come forward then and give your name and we'll record it? Thank you.
Sorry, I think I got missed out on the way in. My name's Steve Quill. My wife and I are the owners of 102 Atfield. We bought the property about 4 years ago with the view that eventually we'd like to move into it, which we've now decided to do. To be honest, I don't want to get into the... we're very emotional about this sort of stuff. I guess all I would say is we started engaging with the council over 12 months ago to make sure that we complied with all of the requirements that the council wanted. We've constantly given in from that heritage point of view. We've taken it all on board. We're passionate about this house and we want to restore it to the best it's ever been. But by the same token, it's development, and we needed to get a little bit more room for our family. Some of the vision, I think, from the diagrams makes it look a little bit more imposing than what it is. Ultimately, we've been painted into a corner with the upper story that seems to be causing the drama because it's not allowed to be seen from Atfield Street. So we've been pushed into the southeastern corner. We've shrunk that after concerns that were raised by the neighbours and more than accepted by the council. As far as the tree goes, it's on our property. The comment about the wall, we've got no interest. If the plans clearly show that the wall is set back onto our property, so if we wanted to, we could knock the wall over and reclaim the land. I've mentioned to the neighbours that we have no interest in doing that. We love that limestone wall. We don't want it to go. We've told them that we'll leave it. The tree is clearly on our property, and we need that to be removed so that we can do what we'd like to do with the property. There's about 3 other significant trees on the property which we've retained, so we're not just getting trees because we don't like trees. We're more than sympathetic with Alex and Essie's situation, but the tree's also causing root damage on our property, so we need to consider that. As far as the overshadowing, which seems to be an issue, I mean that we've been very mindful of that, and despite the fact that it was raised recently that our plans were incorrect, they weren't incorrect, they were below the percentage, and we've since then reduced them even further to try and allay the fears of the neighbours. We defer to the experts on what's allowed and what's not allowed there. I suppose there's rules that say whether you can do it or you can't do it. Once again, I'm unsure about the solar panels other than to say that the solar panels have been there for 2 years. They sit flat on the roof, which is reasonably unusual. They're pushed right up against our boundary, so if we're taking the solar panels purely into account on their own, we literally couldn't put our hand up and we'd be affecting the solar panels. We note that prior to those panels going up, these panels are sitting flat. The panels before that were sitting on an angle like you see a lot, so I'm sure, and we've mentioned to Nigel and Annie that we're more than happy to engage with them and see if we can help them move them around. So look, in short, there's 2 sides to every story. We've been doing this process for a very long time. We're passionate about the house. We want to move in. We're now literally talking about 10 centimetres when we could probably reclaim more than that by pushing the wall out the back that we have no incentive to do. This caused us an enormous amount of stress and disappointment, and yeah, we would really request that you accept the proposal as they are. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers. Okay, we'll
ask a question of the owner.
Yes. Could the owner please come forward again, and we'll just thank you.
Thanks, and acknowledge everything that you said. And noting that I got an alternative recommendation, but also noting that even if that was to happen, the extent of modification that would be required from a legal planning perspective would not be significant, which is what you said.
Sorry, I wasn't aware that an alternative been moving
so
forward.
that, yeah, and that might be, it might be debatable as to whether it does or it doesn't. What I wanted to ask though is the upper story is set very much on the southern side of the footprint for the two bedrooms, 2 or the 3 bedrooms, and yet the footprint of the building underneath is goes significantly further to the north, and I genuinely wonder why an architect would design it in that way when the option is to push more of the development of the upper floor to the north. It doesn't change anything on the ground floor other than perhaps the ceiling height over your dining area, which would be 3 metres instead of the 4 or 5 metres or whatever it is currently proposed. So I'm just genuinely inquisitive, because I will be having something to say about that, as to why you wouldn't have looked at that in the context of all of the concerns raised by the neighbours.
Thanks for your question. I mean, we did. Short answer is initially we took all of that into consideration with the first lot of plans, and the council indicated that we couldn't go any further north because of the view from Hatfield Street. That seemed to be the only reason we're stuck into that corner, is because the visibility from Hatfield Street was a major heritage consideration.
Okay, that's interesting. If I can continue to ask a question. So that was in relation to, I mean, my understanding is that bit that extends from the old house to the north is an addition, is it not? So
at the moment there's a sleep out. We're adding about...
No, I'm just saying that looking at the existing building, there is presumably Joan Campbell or whoever built something to the side of the existing building on the north side. Is that original or is that an addition?
On the north side,
so
sorry.
behind the car parks.
There's
Anyway,
no...
That's all right.
There's no other buildings.
I'll ask the officers. Thanks.
Yeah, no, short answer is, as I say, we tried to move it over. We're not able to move it over any further.
Okay,
Heritage.
I think we can clarify some of that with the officers, perhaps. Thank you very much. Yep. Now there are no further speakers on that item. No, so we'll go into the council discussion, and Councillor Sullivan has an alternate motion, or we could have a mover for the officer's recommendation. Is the mood that Councillor Sullivan moved the alternate motion? No objection?
I'll move the officer's recommendation just to give that a go.
You. Is there a seconder to the officer's recommendation? Seconded by Councillor Kamada. Councillor Graham, did you wish to speak on the officer's recommendation?
Yes, I'll just briefly speak. I had a look at this property, yes, and they're very close together. 102, 104, the whole of this part of Hatfield Street is very close together. But listening tonight to the applicants, I'm getting a bit more sympathetic to them, because it is a very tricky site to do an extension on, and if the setback that we're only talking about is only marginal, I just don't perhaps see the point of it. But I'd be interested to see what others have to say. So at this stage, I am still in favour of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Any further discussion on the officer's recommendation? Councillor Kamada.
Yeah, just a quick comment. And again, it was great to hear from both sides of the argument, but it appears that the applicant has considered considered what Councillor Sullivan has put to him as an option, and has been pushed into a corner, I suppose, where it wouldn't matter which way you go. There are going to be impacts on somebody. So, in light of that, I do support the officer's recommendation. I'll keep it as simple as that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the officers? Yes, we've got some now. Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, it's in the form of a question because what was raised just then by the owner and the like is, of course, things which are not necessarily seen by us as elected members, i.e. the process of the previous proposals to get to where we are now. So my question is, I mean, I know that house reasonably well, and my feeling is that the lounge room, if you look at the current plan, the existing plan, that the lounge and dining area is an addition that was built in the 70s or 80s. It's a wonderful addition. It's beautiful. I don't know whether Joan Campbell built it or the like. But that if that wasn't there and someone was proposing a two-storey building that far back, that it would be something that we would consider, because the rule about being behind the ridge line, and I know that this doesn't sound like a question, but I think the manager needs to hear the preamble to get the question right. If that was just the original long, skinny cottage, hip at the front, veranda at the front, and someone proposed to build a two-storey building, way back, like 8 metres further back from the apex of the front roof, I would have thought that would have been assessed as compliant. But what seems to be happening is that the return roof that sits over what I believe to be a much more contemporary addition on the north side of the existing building, that they're now saying that it has to be 4 metres behind that ridge line, which meant that the applicant's been forced to push all of the development to the south, which then impacts on the property to the south. And if that's the premise, we don't get to see that as elected members. And that's why I guess automatically go, why the hell are they doing that? Why wouldn't they be trying to be as generous as they can, given that they've got a fairly wide block, on not impacting on the property to the south? So I'm just wondering whether that planning assessment is based on being 4 metres behind a relatively contemporary ridge line that's already set way back behind the heritage part of the building.
Perhaps we could get that clarified from the manager.
I'll do my best. Unfortunately, the discussions that happened before the lodgement of the application I was not party to. It was with our heritage coordinator predominantly. The plans that got lodged with the application are fairly similar to what is in front of council tonight, with some minor changes. But I guess there is always room for discretion in terms of that 4 metre setback from the ridge line as well. So I can see there being a scenario where those additions at the back could be moved towards the northern part of that lot, across a little further to reduce the impact on the southern neighbour, without a significant impact on the heritage significance from Atfield Street. But again, I can't comment on the discussions that were had prior to the lodgement of the application because I was not involved.
So just to be clear, those conversations would have been like informal conversations prior to the lodgement of the original plan. We're looking at the modified plan.
That's correct. The modified plan really is only I guess a few millimetres, 100 millimetres here and there, and the setback from the rear, I guess, was the main change during the lodgement of this application. But prior, I believe there was a much different proposal put forward by the applicant that was worked through for quite some time with the heritage team.
I'll finish my statement then. Wow. That makes me even more want to, one, get the issue of the cadastral boundaries and the issue of whether or not the overshadowing diagram is indeed correct, or whether it's marginally out, requiring yet slightly more change. But more importantly, as someone that probably helped write those rules about the 4 metre setback, I would not, in a fit, read those rules in the way that I'm hearing them being read at the moment, because we're talking about a second-story building that must be 8 metres behind the apex of the roof of the original cottage, and if that's not acceptable, even in a tight, heritage precinct like South Fremantle, then I'm gobsmacked. So I do know that the lounge room is a beautiful building, and maybe someone interpreted it as being old. I don't know exactly how old it is. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty confident that it's a relatively contemporary, in the last 40 years, beautiful addition. And if someone had built a 2-story building in that exact location, they probably would have been able to do it, and they probably should be allowed to do it. So I'm just really worried that the applicant is in a situation where they've done the right thing in terms of dealing with the staff, but may have been led down their beautiful garden path that they have, and that the impact of that is really significant, particularly on the southern neighbours, but also on the neighbours to the east to a slightly lesser degree. So anything that could have been done to bring it a bit further off from the eastern boundary and definitely from the southern boundary would have been a very great outcome for all parties. And we're not in this room being able to even sort of really think about that. So either, for me, I want to, I know that, they've owned it for 4 years. They're probably desperate to get on with it and the like. But once it's built, it's there forever, and your neighbours don't necessarily go away. And, we have, in South Fremantle, we are, in the midst of massive gentrification. And these are 2 relatively wide lots. These are slightly, these are like double lots in the South Fremantle context. So we can't get it right on these lots. What hope are we going to get it right on the other lots? And I would also say, and I'm not saying that the applicants have, but from what I've heard, they've been forced to squeeze it into that south east corner. But the reality is, if the person to the north of them proposed something very similar, their entire courtyard would be in shadow as well. So unless we get these things right, we're just going to have this, all these people want to come and live in South Fremantle and build bigger houses and all basically get grumpy at each other because we don't get the right planning outcome. So anyway, it seems like there are fantastic solutions. They've got a great opportunity, and I think it's worth either deferring it to get those issues clarified, or moving my alt rec, which is effectively the same thing.
Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Lorber.
Yeah, so this is one where I really think having a little more time is whether we defer it or go with the alternate motion put by Councillor Sullivan would be a good way forward. There are some questions, some unresolved questions in my mind still about that boundary and about the overshadowing, and taking a little more time, as Councillor Sullivan said, to really make sure we're getting this right, I think is important. And also hearing from the applicant, it sounds to me like they were kind of pushed into that corner from conversations, and that they might even be amenable to finding a solution that works with the neighbors. So I'm not in any hurry I know that they've been chomping at the bit for a while, they said for a year, but taking a few more weeks to actually allow those conversations to allow that further information to be provided, I think would be a prudent move in this instance. So I don't want to vote against the officer's recommendation and refuse it. So before we consider a vote on what's before us, if Councillor Sullivan's alternate motion isn't put forward, I would like to move a deferral. So I'll just flag that for everyone right now. Thank you.
Thank you. just before we do that, at the moment we're dealing with the officer's recommendation, which if it doesn't get supported, we can either defer the item or we can go to Councillor Sullivan's alternate motion, which pretty much, as he said, does the same thing. Yep. Yes, and Councillor Sullivan can move it at any point, but right now Councillor Williamson Wong has had her name flagged, so I'll go to that.
Thank you. Look, I don't know if I have much more to add than from what Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Lorver have said tonight. I think it appears that we're almost having the wrong conversation tonight on the wrong discretion. And I am very sympathetic to the owner and applicant. It seems like you've approached this in very good faith and have tried your hardest and have had the right conversations. But I do agree that it feels like it just needs a little bit more time to get the best outcome for everyone. And I'm sorry that I'm going to say that because I know that that is entirely frustrating. And I don't like to make people frustrated, but I think, you know, I sit here trying to make decisions for community, and what Councillor Sullivan said is right. We don't want to end up with people living on these lovely, in more, or I guess, improved density blocks in anger with their neighbours. So I think that it is for everyone's interest tonight that we either go with the alternative motion or a deferral. But I thank the applicant for all of their work so far and all the conversations that you've had with our team.
Thank you. Councillor Lang.
I've got a couple of queries regarding the boundary issue that was raised by the neighbours. I would personally like to see clarification on that before I could make a vote either way, so I would support the alternate recommendation.
Well, we can have Councillor Sullivan move the alternate recommendation at any time. He could do that, or we can vote on the current motion that's before us.
I'll move my alt rec.
Is there a seconder to the alt rec? Councillor Lang. Is there any discussion on the alternate rec other than would you like to speak to it?
Look, I won't say much because I think I spoke reasonably at length before. Other than to say the alt rec, I think almost suggests tweaking, and I think we're at a stage where I think the applicant should be given an opportunity to perhaps have a conversation about do they really have to have those setbacks? So basically having a meeting probably to almost mediate a little bit the outcome. So the alt rec does that. Doesn't really matter whether we defer it or the alt rec or whatever. It's essentially saying the same thing. But I just want to make it clear that the alt rec is probably imperfect based on the information that was presented tonight.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the alt rec? I mean, perhaps with the conversation we've had tonight, some of that can be looked into. Sorry, we don't engage in debate with the public at this point. Okay, all those in favour of the alt rec? Those against? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Graham, Councillor Van Dawson. Sorry, I just had a mental blank. Thank you, and that is carried. So that alternate recommendation, which I'm not sure you've seen, has been approved. So the best thing would be that you contact the staff tomorrow or during the week and have a discussion with them. So people who are here for item 3 are welcome to leave now if they wish to, but they're very welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. But we'll move on to item 4, which is Norfolk Street, number 5 Norfolk Street. 4, that's what I said, isn't it? Yeah. Right, number 4 Norfolk Street. We have do we have speakers on that? No. Georgina Willis, did you wish to speak on this one? No, she's already spoken. Sorry, she's spoken. No, I think we're done with that one. So I will move the officer's recommendation on this. Just to move along, Councillor Lang has seconded it. Is there any discussion on this particular item? Councillor Sullivan has got a proposed
Yeah,
amendment.
I'll move my amendment if there's no discussion.
Is there a seconder to Councillor Sullivan's? Councillor Graham. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favour of the amendment? That is unanimous. Is there any discussion now on the amended motion? Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. Elected members have looked at this from every different angle. I know a number of people have been out on numerous sites and had numerous conversations and the like. The conversations from the neighbours to the south did kind of alarm me initially, but the reality is it's like a 1.5-storey building along that boundary. It's not the 4-storey building that they're talking about. The 4-storey element is much further back, and at the end of the day, I actually think the applicants have done a really good job at mitigating as far as reasonably possible the potential for overshadowing, light overspill, overlooking, noise, all of those sort of things. So as much as I get the concern of the neighbour, in some ways, some of the facilities that they already have are no smaller and no more imposing than what's being proposed from the other side of the fence back onto them. So I think the architects and the applicant have done a good job, and that's why I support it.
Councillor Lang.
I think this is a really welcome addition to Norfolk Street. Increasing a residential population in the city of Fremantle is one of our strategic objectives. And in particular, the applicants, I think, have done a really good job in taking the council on the journey, try and, as Councillor Sullivan touched on, to find a development that suits the neighbourhood in the area. So it really is a welcome addition to that end of Norfolk Street.
Thank you. Councillor Williamson-Wong.
Thank you. Look, I also went out to visit some properties, and I think what I guess really struck me is that, of course, that development is going to change the experience of the adjoining neighbours, but that vast majority of what will change for those neighbours is permitted under our schemes and local planning policies, and the discretions that are sought in terms of the setback is minimal, 50 centimetres, and that's not to say that it will not have an impact on those neighbours. But I think when I'm trying to understand what we are being asked to decide on tonight, it feels more minimal than, yeah, a 4-storey kind of box that may be imposing. And so I will be supporting the development because I think I agree with Councillor Lang, it's a great addition to Norfolk Street and the sort of development that has considered the streetscape and the surrounding, I guess, character. And I also thank Councillor Sullivan for the amendment which talks about parking considerations, because that was something that came up with residents, and I'm glad that has been included in the motion. Losing my words.
It is a motion now. Is there any further discussion on this item? All those in favour of the amended motion? I believe that's unanimous. Thank you. That has been approved. So we'll now move to the remainder of the speakers. Yep, on item 5. So the first is Pam Catalini. Welcome, Pam.
Good evening, and I'm here about the tree on 195 High Street, Fremantle. And this process has been long and unnecessarily stressful, and I'm disappointed in being here 19 months after our initial application. I've never given permission for this tree to be put on the significant tree list. I've only applied for it to be taken off the register, not removed from the ground. This tree has cost me a considerable amount of money over the past few years.
Do you have to move to change the
I'll just check. There's nobody here for the item on the heritage area? No, that's right. So please carry on. It's item 6. It was just written as item 5 on the list here. So I just read the wrong number out.
No,
Sorry.
I won't have time.
So this is 6
I,
mil.
I've, ne- I've never given permission for this tree to be put on the significant tree register. I only applied for it to be taken off the register, not removed from the ground. This tree has cost me a considerable amount of money over the past few years, with repairs to all the buildings, especially roof and gutter replacements. The ongoing cost will also be upgraded to over $10,000 per year in just the cleaning of the yard, as I refuse to continue doing it myself with my family. This morning I carted 4 large containers of leaves and sticks to the bin while you were all having breakfast. We've gone to a lot of time and trouble to produce a submission for you to consider, which I have here, the submission. And I would like to ask the question, can you please confirm if all councillors have read this submission before voting? This submission was presented at the end of June and it is now September, so I urge those who have not read it to read it and consider their actions before this process continues. And we did submit the submission to you all.
That was received.
Thank you.
We now move to Anthony Catalini. Oh, you're welcome. Well, perhaps if each of you just comes forward, gives your name, and you can choose your order. Yeah.
Right, good evening, Deputy Mayor and councillors. My brother and sister will be speaking shortly on the issue we're addressing tonight. Before they do that, I do want to mention 3 points that I think you need to keep in mind. One of them is the council's initial lack of attention given in the process of transferring the trees from the heritage list to the register, which is highlighted in the officer's report, which is stated that the trees existing at 15 Harvest Road didn't actually exist, but they were transferred onto this list on the register in 2019. These were non-existent trees. With regard to this stated in submissions 1, 4 and 6, the officer report has dismissed the points raised in the objection in favour of cultural heritage and landmark significance. LPP 2.23 does not state that these factors override the other criteria of LPP 2.23, and the officer report does not justify how cultural heritage overrides other criteria. Based on submission 6 of objection 195 High Street and giving due regard to LPP 2.23, this tree should not be included on the register for a number of reasons, including the following. 1, the landowner does not give consent to the listing. 2, the tree impacts on the development potential of the property for which it is zoned. It presents potential damage and danger. And LPP 2.23 does not prioritise cultural heritage over other policy criteria, yet other criteria has been inappropriately assessed in this process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening, Stacey Catalini Town, speaking on the submission of objection. I just wanted to make several statements in regard to the officer's report. It says that there are nil financial implications and nil legal implications for this item. The matters and recommendations the subject of this agenda item could have financial and legal implications given the possibility of defending this matter in a court of law and or SAT. It has been stated that legal advice has already been sought on numerous occasions, and to state that financial and legal implications are nil is an unacceptable omission of reporting. It is the duty of officers to report this to elected members and for this to be conveyed to ratepayers. The officer report says, although not expressly mentioned in regulation, the city would undoubtedly contemplate a variation to development standards to facilitate the retention of the trees subject to design quality. Well, if this is the case, and not just an officer opinion, then council needs to state this in its resolution. The officer report says ownership of land where a significant tree is present is little different to ownership of land with a heritage listing building on it.
meaning that there are certain responsibilities and restrictions that accompany custodianship. Or heritage provisions allow for variations, but significant tree registration does not. It is entirely different. The burden is exacerbated by the tree, placing further restrictions for which no compensation is available or provided. The officer report says no development would be permitted between the heritage-listed Cranworth Villa and the street. Who has decided this? Where is that regulation? The officer report said council could, as it has done before, contemplate varying scheme standards. As already stated, if this is the case, why isn't council stating it in the resolution? The officer report says approximately 60% of the site could be redeveloped to 5 stories, and that it's not considered that registration of the tree will impose any unreasonable restrictions to the development potential of the site. Conservatively, only approximately 55% of the site is available for redevelopment, and that is little more than half of the site. And we find it difficult to understand that the officer does not consider this to be unreasonable restriction. Other methods have been suggested that could be employed to recognise the cultural heritage associated with the trees, such as plaques and public artworks and photos. Several trees on private property that have been removed over the years that were previously on the heritage list have been alternatively acknowledged in the local heritage survey as a historical record only. And the landowner has in the past also proposed to provide a replacement tree in a more suitable location. If council continues to include the tree on the register, then the only pathway left for trees on the register is for landowners to apply for a development application to remove the tree completely. This is really not what you intended. Why on earth would council want us to move towards those scenarios? Just leave the tree off the list. Simple.
If you just give your name so we've got it for the record.
Tony Catalini. I'll be the last speaker too, Councillor Archibald, so we're aware of time. As you're all aware, because of these words in clause LPS 4, clause 13A, in considering a proposal to include a place on the significant tree register, council shall notify in writing owners and occupiers of a place where a tree is located. That's why we're here. Are you also aware that it goes on to say, and provide them with a copy of the description referred to in clause 4.1? In April, the council resolved to undertake listing the trees on the significant tree register again. As it suggests, it may not have followed all the correct administrative processes originally. Specifically, that it contacted owners and not occupiers as required. Note, council has never provided evidence that they have contacted either the owners or the occupiers in the original process. In May, the council notified the owners and occupiers of 19 High Street and other places where trees are located that they would be re-registering the trees to remove any doubt and comply with the requirements of clause 13A. So clause 13A part 2 reads, in considering a proposal to include a place on the register of significant trees, the council shall, which we all know means must, notify in writing the owner and occupier of a place where a tree is located and provide them with a copy of the description referred to in clause 4.1. In the letter sent to owners in 2018 and the letter sent in May, council has not provided owners and occupiers with a copy of the description referred to in clause 4.1. So neither the letter, as I said, in May, or the description goes to 4.1. The letters do not even refer to the requirement to comply with the provision of the scheme, mention due regard to the planning policies or design guidelines which affects the scheme. This is a significant omission as it is important information for the owners and occupiers to make an informed decision. The omission of this section of reference to 4.1 in the process means that the work done in May, all the consulting, all the references we put in is all again flawed. The whole process is flawed again for a second time. Thus, the trees presently on the STR register are not on there. And after this process, they will remain off. Can the Mayor, sorry, Mayor's not here. Sorry about this, I've got to mix up with my notes. Councillor Archibald, can you ask the CEO, or can you ask the Director of Planning if he is aware of the important omission of the letter Councillor Archibald, can you please ask the Director of Planning if he is aware of this omission from the letter signed off by him in May of this year? And just quickly in closing, this omission was basic and foreseeable. It's an error from the council officers. It's an error from the Director of Planning. It's an error from the CEO. It's an error from your legal advisors. And if this gets up tonight, we're going to be back doing this process again for a third time because it's a mission that must have been done and was not. It's quite embarrassing, we feel, for the council and for the city. And councillors, if this gets up, even based on this one, I'd hope you'd be embarrassed for the officers. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll invite the Director of Planning to make a comment. Could you just also clarify too that in the policy where it says we must get the permission, I believe it's of the owner, not necessarily the occupier. Is that correct? Is it both?
Just to clarify, the process was in response to doubt about the process used back in 18, which was around the consultation under the planning scheme. We could not find evidence that the occupiers were consulted with. It's not to say they weren't, but we think there was sufficient doubt to run that process under the scheme. The letter that went out more recently to rerun that process, we have had legal viewing over the correspondence that's went out in terms. There was a lot of questions raised there. I'd need time to have a look at the clause 4.1 and what reference there was or inferred. Our understanding was the letter went out to both owners and occupiers, and it was very clear what the statement of significance was that we were seeking comment back on.
Okay, and just to clarify with the policy, it does say that we must get the permission of the owner and the occupier, or just the owner?
Through the chair, there's two things here. The policy that was adopted after the original transfer of trees talks about getting consent from the owner, and that's it. But in terms of the planning scheme, it is both owner and occupier, and that's the bit that was in doubt.
Okay, there are no further speakers now on this item, correct? Yep, great. Yes, now before we go into this item, Councillor Van Dawson has declared an interest. Yeah, I thought we did that. Yes, I mean there's nobody here for item 5, so we're dealing with this item first. So and then we'll deal with item 5 later. I'll check to see if there are any questions. Yeah. So, are there any questions before we go into the actual item? No? Thank you.
Yes, I have a question.
Right, 3 questions. Great, thank you.
Yeah, this question relates to earlier the comments by Jared O'Brien about he felt that there was a requirement for it's not the fig tree. I'm sorry, I will get to that in a minute. But about on the item, the trees on Harvest Road, I believe is. Oh, sorry, no question. Sorry, question for the officers.
Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, in terms of the letter from Lavan Legal, in relation to clause 13A1, it appears, or my understanding of your contention is that the council has not at any stage actually legally created the significant tree list, so created a list which we could put trees on. Is that your understanding? No, I know that, but is that also still your contention that the list itself has not been formally established by council? Yeah. Yeah. So I'll ask the officers when we move the item, but I just wanted to make clear that that is effectively the one of the 2 main elements of that letter. terms of the new letter.
Okay, thank you. No further questions? Councillor Williamson-Wong?
I believe I have a question, but I'm just going to reread this.
Of
It's
the, yep,
of
of the
the
speakers.
speaker. Apologies. Sorry, apologies for my misunderstanding. Could you please clarify around 4.1? Because I believe I've missed something.
Sorry, would you mind using the speaker because it is recorded? Thank you.
Notify the owner and the occupier of the, sorry, I've got to
Yeah.
find the correct place.
No, I'm following.
Notify the owner and the occupier of the place where a tree is located and provide them with a copy of the description referred to in clause 4.1. So clause 4.1 of LPS 4, that's what we're talking about. There is no mention of clause 4.1 from LPS 4 in any of the correspondence received from council on this matter, and it's a must to comply.
Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you. So now we will go into debate. So I will seek somebody to move. Oh, sorry. Yes, I'll seek somebody to move the officer's recommendation. And I'll just flag that I have asked for a very minor amendment, which separates out part 2 into 4 parts, part A, B, C, D, just so that it can be voted on separately because they are all different trees in different locations. So is there somebody who would like to move the officer's recommendation? Councillor Lang, is there a seconder to the officer's recommendation? Councillor Lorber. And
Can I ask my question?
yes, well, you can ask a question and you can speak later if you wish. Yep, thank you.
Great. So in regards to Jared O'Brien and the streets on Henderson Street, he made some comments about, just pull up here, about being required to do succession planning. I just was wondering if staff could clarify, because reading the document that was given to us, it just says consideration should be made for succession planting to ensure that a healthy grove of trees remains. So I just was wondering if we could get some comment about the level of requirement when it's was before us, is just to consider it. Is he in fact going to be required to do these planting, or just think about it and consider it?
Through the chair, it is for consideration. It's not part of the council recommendation. That came out of the arboriculturalist report, so we'd be passing that on as we would to any other owner if there's some advice that would come out of this process. It's not something that would be a requirement.
Okay, I'll just get this clarified then, part 2, just so that people are aware we've got it as A, B, C, D, so we can deal with that separately. People can vote specifically on each section of the of part 2. So it was considered minor, and it doesn't change the intent of the motion. So the governance officer accepted it. Okay. Yep. She's going to clarify. Thank you.
Through the chair, just to clarify, we are separating out part 2 into A, B, C, D. So each tree will be considered separately if we do move them in separate parts. We're just going to just make sure that she's shown on the screen for you.
Okay, we have a motion before us. Is there any discussion? Councillor Sullivan, a question?
Questions, yeah, just seeking clarification from staff regarding whether the requirements of 4.1 were adhered to in the letters that were sent out. And secondly, any response to the issue of whether the actual list as an entity in the scheme has been formally approved as a part of the scheme to be created.
I would need some additional time to check on 4.1 and exactly what went out in terms of letters. But we're under the understanding that all that's required in terms of the clause 13A and consultation was followed, and the letters had everything in it that was required. The intent was very clear. Second part of your question, Councillor Sullivan.
Sorry, the second part was 13A. The first part was 13A in relation to the establishment of the register. I mean, presumably there has to have been a motion at some stage to say we're going to establish a register, and then separately a process of putting trees onto that register.
I think a lot of it will come down to the interpretation, certainly in the Laven letter, whether there was a precise resolution or when council transferred trees from the heritage list to the register, you would argue that was the establishment of a register.
Could I just clarify, do we have a register under the scheme rather than under policy?
We believe we do. That's been challenged, but we believe that the list is there. It's been there since 2019 and it's had trees on it.
So it is the same list that we're talking about. Is there any discussion on the motion that's before us? Councillor Kamada.
Yeah, I think I've been consistent in my opinion on this matter throughout the whole process, going back to February. It clearly states that LPP 2.23 says the city will not accept an application for a significant tree or vegetation area to be included on the register without the landowner's consent. And I know that it's been suggested that this can be overridden by LPS 4 or 4.1 or whatever you want to state. But to me, it is very clear what is said here. And I feel that this has gone on way too long. I don't think it is right to force these good people to do something that they simply do not want to do. You know, really, is it all worth it when you look at the reality that with a DA, this tree can be removed? And it's not something that I know that these people want to have happen. It's very simple. This tree was not, the consent was not given. It was made clear today by the owner that that consent was not given at that time. I implore my fellow councillors to strongly consider not voting for trees that do not have the owner's consent, because I believe the risk is not worth it. And I think down the track, it might be a costly decision. Obviously, that's your decision. Earlier today, we had an item on Outfield Street which has been deferred, but there was approval to remove a tree on private property. And I'm very strong on this principle. Doesn't mean that me believing this, that I don't understand or appreciate the importance of trees, particularly trees in the right area. And you know, I support 100% planting trees in the right places, and canopy is very important for this city. But in this situation, I think we've got it wrong, and I think we have a chance to rectify it tonight.
Councillor Lorver?
Yeah, I, you know, really, you know, this is an issue that I just wish, you know, didn't come before us so many times, but it kind of highlights for me the fact that, you know, this council has approved a staff recommendation that we thoroughly review our tree retention policies like LPP 2.23 and other things in the city. And I'm really looking forward for us to get on with that work so we can actually get policies that, one, work for the community, work for the landowners, and work for the council and our strategic objectives. So that's, for me, what I'm really, this whole process has highlighted to me that that work really needs to get done. While for me, there is no doubt that, in my mind, that today that the Catalini family does not want this tree on the tree register. For me, I look back at what's been put before us, and since way before I was even living in Australia, and this tree was given protection by being on the heritage list. Now, on the day, that was how I would assume that trees were protected in Australia, because there wasn't a significant tree list. There was the heritage list. So this tree was given protections to put on there. And when that occurred is all well documented. Later on, and this is probably the biggest thing for me, we were presented information that the Catalini family and the city entered into a joint maintenance agreement for this tree. So at one point in time, there was agreement between the family and the city to help maintain this tree on that property. Now, the city may not have lived up to that end of the obligation, and I would really, and I think early on, I put some amendments forward to encourage the city to, do what they can to help with the maintenance of that tree. But when you enter an agreement to maintain a tree, that's an agreement that the tree is significant in my mind. So further down the track, that occurred. Now, transferring a tree from one form of protection, which was a heritage list, onto the significant tree register, which is what is here today, it's just, in my mind, it's a simple transfer. And while, again, I completely understand that today the family is adamantly against it, there is a process to remove trees from the significant tree register. It's not this one. And I would really encourage folks that to use that process that we have. So yeah, so I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation as I have throughout this entire time that we've been debating this tree and the other trees on this list. And it's just, yeah, I just really wish that it wasn't such a long, drawn out experience for everybody.
Further speakers? Councillor Graham?
Yeah, I suppose I better have my two bobs worth, since it's getting late in the night. Look, I'm fundamentally opposed to this whole notion that, council says to people, you've got a tree and we're going to put it on a register. I just, personally, I don't think that's ever going to stand up in court, no matter how strong you think that these LP23s are and 13(1)As and all this sort of thing. I mean, I'm a bit of a pragmatic bloke, and I don't think I'm in a pragmatic council, because if I was in a pragmatic council to finish this whole saga off, and this saga's been going on for, Catalina's will be able to tell you more than I will, we'd simply just take it off the register, and that would solve all the problems, because the tree is still protected by the Heritage Council. It's got all these other protection layers on it. But for some reason, the council come up with this significant tree register, which is like fear-mongering that, oh, you're going on the significant tree register, you'll will never be able to do anything with it. And I just can't get my head around it. I mean, a question is, what about trees on public land? Should they be on the tree register, or is there some other issue there?
Trees on public land are protected through the council process.
Council process.
So it's only, we're only really dealing with trees on
Well,
private
isn't
land.
that sort of an oxymoron? I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, I grew up on South Street. There's the pine trees up the top end of South Street near Carrington Street. South Street's still got a zoning to widen South Street. That's been there ever since I was a kid, and I don't think it's ever been lifted. The only thing that's going to stop South Street getting widened is the protection. If they were a significant tree, given the significant tree status, would be the Norfolk pines. So are we saying when Main Roads decide to widen South Street, they'll just come in and chop down there's about half a dozen of them up there, going up on the right? Magnificent. And they're a great visual thing as well. So, I really don't understand all this. And I'm not going to try and understand it anymore, because I'm totally over it. I just want the pragmatic approach. Take this tree off the register. If we get a development application in 2 years' time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time to get rid of it, well, the council at the time then will have to deal with that. And but at the moment, this will never go away if we continue to go down this path.
Just to be clear, the tree isn't on the register. That's the subject of the debate tonight. Yeah, sorry. Councillor Sullivan. Yeah, it's a recommendation. It's not yet on it. Yeah, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I think the recommendation actually is to reconfirm that it is on it, because that's the way the officers have presented it, but that's another matter. For me, this issue, and Councillor Graham raised that, well, it's still protected under heritage, is really the crux of the problem here, because we have this unbelievably ridiculous planning legislation that, for some very stupid reason, says that when you're dealing with heritage, it only relates to built form heritage. It only relates to buildings. Now, any definition of heritage that exists anywhere else always talks about the fabric, and it doesn't even restrict heritage to being something which is physical. It can be social and other things. And to have in the planning scheme that, oh, well, when it comes to trees or landscapes of significance, you have to have a different process than when we deal with a building is just fundamentally absurd. And that is why I have become so frustrated by this process because, you know, the heritage listing of the site talks a lot about the trees, about the owner, the social significance of the owner. It's all integrated into one heritage package, and yet the state government and the powers that be that run the bloody planning scheme basically don't allow us to deal with it the right way, which is through that. In a separate conversation, I support the notion of having significant trees protected, but our list has barely got 7 trees on it, some of which I don't think should be on it, some of which are claimed to be culturally significant as well. Some of them I would suggest aren't. The only one, in my view, that actually is reasonably proven to be culturally significant is, in fact, the tree on the Catalinis property. But the problem I find with this whole process is that trying to fix the absurdity of the planning scheme, the planning system, by trying to shoehorn the culturally significant trees onto a list that doesn't have any other trees on it is becoming a bit of a mockery. And I said that last time. I said I was just completely over it, felt it was the wrong solution, and didn't support it. And I'm still of that opinion. That doesn't mean I want to see the tree removed. I'm pretty confident from everything I've ever heard that the Catalinis don't, even all the way back to when John was my mayor at the time, and ever since then. And the energy that's been put into maintaining the tree has been significant and should be acknowledged and the like. And indeed, when I went to try and collect some seeds from the tree to germinate, I know that Pam's rigour at cleaning the site up has been such that it was incredibly difficult to find a ripe fig anywhere out in the public realm or in their car park or the like. I persevered and I have some trees generated now, but of course the Polyphagous shot-hole borer is probably going to put an end to that opportunity to do succession planting of this significant tree somewhere else. I don't think the outcome will be any different whether this tree is on this list or not. I don't hear anybody rushing to chop it down. I still think, frankly, that it should be considered as part of any development application, as part of any heritage concern, because it's part of the social and physical significance of the site. But that should just be left to the next phase when a developer comes along. The other thing I struggle with is we're still arguing, it seems, over whether we've done the process right or wrong. And that is incredibly frustrating for everybody that's in this room. So I'm at a point, I was at a point, the same point last time, that I don't support this. That doesn't mean I don't support significant trees. It doesn't mean I don't support culturally significant trees. It doesn't mean that I don't want to see a register of trees that should be retained, or at least state legislation like other states have that actually recognises the importance of trees and would probably have dealt with the tree in Atfield Street in exactly the same way as it would deal with any tree that shouldn't be just randomly chopped down like that. But that's not what we're dealing with here. The other trees, you know, when this first came up, I said the trees in North Fremantle, look, they're nice trees, but you know, I was struggling to see why they were on a heritage list in the first place. And I said at the time, I'm pretty sure they were put there more because people just thought they were nice trees and they should be retained, which is what a normal tree register would be for, but somehow were thrown into a heritage list for no real cultural significant reasons. And the same, in my view, is true of the ones at the police station. I don't see the cultural significance of those trees. They're nice trees. They do need to be replaced at some stage, that they're getting towards the end of their life. But it's a simple landscaping exercise, not something that should be, you know, shoehorned into being culturally significant as being the best way of trying to, you know, retain a tree. We need to find better ways. The state government needs to do what it's supposed to do and provide a proper legal structure that all councils can apply equally and the community can actually get behind to deal with these matters. And we don't see any evidence of that coming anytime soon. In fact, we see the opposite. So I'm sorry to ramble on, but for all of those reasons, I don't support the recommendation. Yeah, I do have that amendment that's up there, and I will move it because I just think it clarifies. If you are going to support the recommendation, it importantly clarifies the aspect of why the policy was part of the policy was set aside to do this.
So would you like to move that amendment, Councillor Sullivan? I mean, it does just clarify the intent. So are you wishing to move? Is there a seconder to the amendment? Councillor Lorva, is there any discussion on the amendment? All those in favour of the amendment? It just amends the clarity of the document. Okay, all those in favour, or those against? Put those against. Councillor Graham. Yep. Okay, thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Lang would be closing. Because
No, I just got a question actually.
Oh, question. Very good on questions tonight. We are.
Yes, question evening. It's on the comments made by Councillor Graham. I just want a clarification through the chair, perhaps. Director Kingdom might be able to clarify. Forgive me if I got it wrong, but you're suggesting that if the tree wasn't on this list, it would be afforded other levels of protection via heritage, is what you were saying? Just wanted clarification on that.
No, well, it's already got Heritage Council protection, according to the report. I'm sure I read that.
The Director of
Anyway.
Planning to clarify. Thank you.
It is, in fact, a very good question, and it is probably at the root of why this council went through a very difficult process in 2018-19 to establish the register and transfer these trees across, because there was serious doubt as to whether there was any heritage protection under the current circumstances without that register. That's why the register was designed, and that's why this council moved those trees across in 19 to give protection. Without the register, we believe there is no protection under the scheme.
Thank you. Councillor Williamson-Wong.
Thank you. I want to start by saying when I got elected, everyone said that I would have to make lots of hard decisions, and I think this may be the hardest decision that I've had to make, and it has been a series of decisions, I guess. I agree with Councillor Sullivan. I have a huge frustration that we are so good at protecting our built heritage, but we have no protection for our ecological heritage. And it is mind-boggling to me that our state government won't step in and support the protection of our ecological history and heritage, because not only are these significant trees important culturally and historically, but they are also incredibly important as we continue to see increasing heat and climate change. And so I have all of these huge, I guess, frustrations at the system, but I am increasingly I am increasingly feeling as though that this is not the situation in which we have that fight, because it's actually, the decision is not just one of ecological heritage and not cultural heritage, but it is a decision as responsible decision makers on what we think has happened so far. And the process seems risky. And I think, writing down as people have been speaking tonight, we're trying to fix this absurd situation, and it seems like it's becoming more ridiculous. And I will put my hand up and say I was one of the people that started us in this absurd saga. And so I have to own that fact. But I do not think that we should continue down this route because it feels too precarious. And I agree with Councillor Sullivan and other councillors tonight that the outcome will likely be the same when a DA comes. And so while much of what I want to do is to continually protect our ecological heritage and the trees, I don't think that this is the tree that we fight over. And that is a very hard decision that I've had to come to, and I think I've only come to in the last 5-10 minutes. So I thank everyone for putting up with me through that process.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson-Wong. Councillor Graham?
Just to clarify, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Clarification, yeah.
It was page 158 was the list I was referring to, and I said the Heritage Council, it's the National Trust.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers before we move to the end of the debate? No? I might just make a comment that I will remain consistent. I'm a great believer in policy, and if policy doesn't work for us, that we should change the policy, and I've done that a couple of times on this council. This policy is incredibly black and white, and I remember it coming to council because it came the month after I rejoined the council, and it is very clear that I remember in debate and also in the policy it says we would get the owner's consent to list these trees because of the issues that we are now facing. So I will just be consistent in my vote on this. I also think trees are fantastic, and I spend a fair bit of my time trying to save a bit of bush a bit further to the south. But so it doesn't come from a point of discarding trees unnecessarily. So that is my view, and I will now invite Councillor Lang to close the debate. Thank you.
Thanks. I didn't actually think the debate was going to go this way. I can count, and it looks like I can see where this is headed. And I'm actually shocked, to be honest. We're getting caught up in the policy, and to me, the legal advice we've got says we can protect this tree. And 15-minute speech aside, either you support significant trees or you don't. That's as simple as it is. And then trying to suggest that the state government need to update their policies to support us so we can support significant trees, I don't see that happening for decades based on the speed our state government moves on environmental matters at the moment. So we're saying we want our state government to help us here. If I go back a few months ago, our community was asking us, their closest level of government, to help them protect something important in their area and their environment. We did our job as a council and voted to protect the tree. Shifting the blame to state government, I think, is an an absolute cop out. We know that the state government is going to do nothing in this area for decades. It's our job to listen to our community to protect a tree they deem as significant. And as I said, you support significant trees tonight or you don't. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. So the item's been debated, amended, debated and closed. So I will move, I will put the part 1, which is just to note the submissions, because I will move part 2 in the 4 parts. So part 1, all those in favour? Part 1? That is unanimous, I believe. Yes, thank you. Part 2, I'll move part 2A. Is it A? Yep, we've got A, which is the Harvest Road in North Fremantle, the tree in Harvest Road. All those in favour? Are those against? Councillor Sullivan is against. Thank you. I'll move part C, which is 195 High Street. All those in favour? Sorry. 2B, sorry. No, hang on. We did the first bit, which was Harvest Road. Oh, there's 2 Harvest Roads. Sorry. Yeah, 15 Harvest Road, Part B. All those in favour? Those against? Councillor Sullivan's against. Part C, 195 High Street. This is all those in favour of the officer's recommendation that's before us. Those in favour? Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4. That one is lost. And Part D, 45 Henderson Street. All those in favour? Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4. Passed. Could we do that one again? All those in favour of the trees at 45 Henderson Street, which is Gerard O'Brien's property. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4. I will be consistent and use my casting vote to not support the tree. Part 3, 4 and 5. I'll move. Oh no, we've got to add. Part 3, we need to just add 195 High Street, Fremantle, and 45 Henderson Street, Fremantle as dot points because they are no longer supported in that category. So all those in favour. Right, I'll move it as an amendment because otherwise they're not included in part 3 because they weren't included in part 2. So I'll amend that. Is there a seconder to that amendment? Councillor Sullivan. All those in favour of the amendment? That is carried. Those against? Councillors Lorver, Thompson and Lang. So it's carried, and I'll now move the amended part 3. All those in favour, which is to support not to retain the trees on the register. Part 3 amended, yes. All those in favour? As amended, yeah. Part 3, where we're saying those 2 trees are included in part 3, where it says we do not retain those trees in the register. Right, part 3. So that is carried. Councillor Lorver, Thompson and Lang and Williamson wrong. No, so Lang, Thompson and Lorver. Yeah, right. All those in favour of part 3, which has been amended, and these are the trees that are not included in the register. All those in favour? Councillors Kamada, Graham, Sullivan, Williamson Wong and myself. Those against, Councillor Lorver, Thompson and Lang. Part 4, I'll move it as is. All those in favour? Those against? Councillor Sullivan is against. Part 5, we need to just include as amended in part 3. I'll move that amendment. Minor amendment. We'll just move an amendment. I'll move that amendment. Is there a seconder to that amendment? Councillor Williamson Wong. I'll move the part 5 as amended. All those in favour? Part 5 is adopt the amendment of the significant tree register with the amended significant trees as amended in part 3. So we've amended part 3. right? Just to be clear, I'm not. So, yeah,
Just through the chair, because we did remove those trees from the register there in part 2, and we've added them to part 3. This is just to clarify. This part of the recommendation is to add all of the trees and the changes that you've made above into the actual policy itself. So this will form the register itself. Okay. So to be clear, the amendments that you've done above will be included in this, and we'll just alter it. And actually, that is what you're amending. Okay. Is that clear?
Yeah, it's just for consistency. Okay, part 5 as amended. All those in favour? Councillor Williamson Wong, Councillor Kamada, Councillor Graham and myself. Those against? Councillor Thompson, Sullivan, Lang and Lorver. So given that they've already been amended above, I will use my casting vote to support the change. That's it, thank you. Right, so that's the end of that item. There we go. Yeah, let's get, yeah. So could we just, that item is concluded. Yeah, so it's been moved that the tree is not included on the register. So if you want any further discussion on that, you're welcome to chat to the staff tomorrow. So could we get Councillor Van Dawson back in the room, please?
Well done. That was complicated.
Yeah. This is to deal with the next item. So we're doing the South Fremantle Heritage Area. Do you want to do that before we open the item? Yeah. Councillors, we're going to just have a clarification on the disclosures of interest relating to the South Fremantle Heritage Area review by the Governance Officer.
Of course.
Because last time we voted on something like this, there were a couple councillors away, and then we had to come back and revote. I mean, tonight again, we have a couple councillors away, so you know, I didn't really think about it. So just, is that a possibility? I just want to know, is it a possibility that we may have to vote on this again because there were councillors away?
No.
No, we didn't do it again because councillors away. The motion was rescinded formally. Thank you.
Just to clarify the disclosures that we did do earlier in the meeting, I have reviewed Councillor Graham's disclosure, and the property that he has a disclosure in regards to is actually, there is a change on the register, so it is being added to the heritage list. So there are some changes there that will impact his property. So with that, it will be financial and proximity, very similar to Councillor Sullivan's disclosure that he's made. So in that regard, I will advise Council that you can stay with the decision that you've made to allow him to participate in the actual item itself, or you can decide that it is quite significant and that perhaps Councillor Graham should vacate the chamber for this item.
Well, if he leaves, will you have a quorum?
Yes, we need 6, that's correct.
And clarification that I'm okay to stay because the property that I live in doesn't change?
That's correct.
Great.
So the decision that Council did make earlier, the motion to allow you to stay will still remain in place if Councillor Graham has already left. So we will just remove that from the record as well. Okay.
So
Andrew?
do we need to change that motion?
Councillor Graham has already left the chamber, so we will amend the record for that.
Is required to be in here.
Would you like to change the disclosure? We can do that as well. The motion to
do we rescind it or do we? Or
yeah, let's rescind it. That's probably well. We
what-
technically don't need to.
Councillor
And-
Graham has elected
Well,
to not be present.
Yes.
Is that the issue?
It is against the act just to go, well, I don't want to vote on this, I'm going to leave. But
You're,
you just assume he's gone to the
He
toilet.
has left the
yeah,
toilet.
yeah,
that's
he is absent. Okay.
So just so that we do clarify that that element, we can right now make a decision to allow, obviously, to revert back to or to remove that from the decision earlier in the meeting. Okay. So Councillor Graham can.
Well, I think we could just record that he has elected to disclose the interest and has left the meeting on further consideration. Yep, I think that's reasonable. Okay. You would like to take a, we need you to, won't have a quorum if you leave. So we can, look, if we keep going, we'll get this done and we'll all go home. So let's just.
Just potential disclosing a potential conflict on this particular item, so I will leave the room.
Thank you to Councillor Lang. So I will move the officer's recommendation for item 5, the South Fremantle Heritage Area Review final report. And we do have an officer amendment or an officer addition, just for the point of clarity. So I'll pass it to the Director of Planning to just explain. Oh, sorry, can I get a seconder for that? And then we'll deal with the amendment. Seconded by Councillor Thompson. I'll pass it over to you.
Additional comment. Where is that showing? While we're waiting for that to come up, it's just a little bit of extra work we would like to do with the community in terms of writing specifically to each and every person where there is a change. It affects a lot of people. The changes, about 300 changes in listings. People have been written to. We'd prefer to go and belt and brace that piece of communication and make sure that everyone knows what those changes are. So it should be an addition. Yeah, that's item 3. And if there are any objections, that we would bring that back.
Key point is that if there are any objections, it gives people the opportunity to bring them back and we can review them. Yep. So I'll move that officer's amendment.
Can I ask a question before we get into debate about this? Because the first time I've seen it.
Yes, well, it was only put together this afternoon. So.
Yeah.
Well, all right, you ask a question, then I'll move it, and then we'll deal with it.
And the question is, you know, so we're heritage list, get all that stuff, and I understand writing to the owners. I'm just wondering why we would be writing to the occupiers of these buildings. Because if it's just someone leasing a building, they're just, you know, ephemeral, and we could run into the same complications. So I would, if we're gonna, and I appreciate the extensive outreach that's been done, and I appreciate that we're gonna do continued outreach. I'm just wondering why we're writing to the occupiers, because their objection could just be nothing. So. It's
to ensure that under the scheme we have consulted with everyone we should. You're absolutely right, councillor. Through the chair, we could get an objection back by someone occupying. It would be up to council to consider the level or value of that. But we just want to make sure that that's covered.
All right, I'll move the, did we move the full item? Seconded? No, did we? I'll move the amendment. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Thompson. Is there any discussion on the amendment? All those in favour of the amendment? That is unanimous. Thank you. Now, is there any discussion on the item as amended? No. All those in favour of the item as amended? That is unanimous also. Thank you. So we can get back the people who declared an interest. That would be great. Thank you. On to sporting. We just want to defer that one. Yeah, just we're nearly there. Okay, so now we will move to the remainder of the agenda. Does anyone wish to speak on item 7 or item 8? Does anyone wish to speak on item 7 or 8? Well, I'll move both of those items. Is there a seconder? Councillor Lang. Is it all those in favour? That is unanimous. I'll move item 9, but knowing that we did have a discussion on this at the earlier in the week, and there is a proposal to. Sorry. Yeah, there is a proposal to defer this, but as I said, we wish to discuss it first. So I will move the officer's recommendation, seconded by Councillor Lang. Is there any discussion on this before we? No, there's no discussion. Councillor Lorver. You can move the,
Yeah, I'll just flag deferral procedurally because has been noted that we may
sorry,
need.
just before you do actually formally flag it, you flagged it, but you haven't put it. Councillor, oh no, you're
I'm going to
taking
speak
your
to the.
name
I'm going
off.
to speak to the
Sorry, I
item.
was just waiting
Could
to
we
hear
have
what you're saying.
Sorry, I was under the impression we'd have flag a deferral and then we can get to it later, but I was going to speak to the item.
All right, okay, yes, well, if you're speaking to the item, don't defer it until we've been able to discuss
I'm
it.
not moving
Okay.
the deferral, just flagging it.
Great, thank you.
Yes. So we can move it later if so desired. So this is a great. Oh, sorry. Was there a question? A good piece of work that's done by staff, and I think that there's a lot of really, really great points in here. And after the discussion that we had, I guess I feel like the intent for the city to continue working collaboratively with our clubs and leaseholders didn't really come through as much as was intended. So I think that's really the only thing I think that we could improve in this document. So other than that, I think it's a great way for us to move forward with a lot of very important spaces to our community. And so I'll again flag the deferral, and it would be based on those grounds that we can just clarify the city's intention around the continued collaboration.
Thank you, Councillor Lorver. Councillor Van Dawson, you wish to speak still?
I was just going to wait for the deferral, but unless I can move that myself.
Councillor Lorver had already had one drafted up with reasons.
Yes.
Is that okay with you?
Yes,
Yep.
I was happy with that one.
So you don't wish to speak on the item at this stage?
No.
Thank you. Okay, well, are there any other speakers on the item before we move to the deferral? Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, just quickly, because I think there's no debate on the deferral. So I had some points that I also suggested, or one or two, I can't remember now. But if they're part of Councillor Lorver's proposed deferral, they're not. So my only concern, so you don't actually have. Yeah, so Councillor Lorver, you would have seen the email that I also sent that included that commentary that I had about the Bruce Lee Oval and the need for that additional dot point in there. It probably doesn't matter. I mean, I can deal with it at the next council meeting because the deferral is a deferral anyway. So just take governance advice that perhaps it doesn't matter. Yeah, I guess it's a point, for the acting CEO and the staff to basically note, well, we raised a bunch of things through IEM. We would appreciate if all of those things were dealt with and not just the issue of collaboration, which is important, but not the only thing.
And I'll just say this is the first time I've seen the words around the deferral, and my comments of when I put it out there was to include any other items that elected members wanted to put forward. So I'm more than happy to include what Councillor Sullivan had sent through as a friendly amendment or however procedural that needs to go. Just because that was the intent was to capture everything that was discussed at the IEM.
So do you want to succinctly let us know what you would like added?
I already did, but perhaps it could just be generalised to pick up the points that were discussed at the informal elected members meeting, and that would just cover it all.
Just through the chair, that absolutely will happen. As we have advised, the feedback that was provided through the informal sessions with elected members on this plan have been taken on notice, and we will make those changes. We will still provide a plan that we recommend as officers. However, the consistency with language and collaboration and so on throughout the document will be made to the document. When we bring it back to council for consideration again, that is when you can make any further, more detailed changes if you wish. But we absolutely have taken your feedback on board, and that is what we will be doing in the next couple of weeks.
Councillor Sullivan, are you comfortable with that? Yep, thank you. So we'll proceed then with the procedural motion. Councillor Lorva has moved the procedural motion formally now, seconded by Councillor Lang. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. So I don't believe we have any other business, so I will declare the meeting closed at 8:53. Thank you. Sorry? Oh, well, this has got a different time.